Since we had an extra long closed session, we'll be starting in just a minute. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Mahan, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. This little thing?
Good evening. I'm going to call this council meeting to order. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our statement of values? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Before we have roll call, I want to remind everyone that Vice Mayor Mahan is joining us from out of town. Vice Mayor Mahan, are you connected with us? Okay, very good. Thank you. So roll call, Assistant City Clerk.
Vice Mayor Mahan.
Here.
Councilmember Hardy.
Here.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Watanabe.
Here.
Councilmember Shahal.
Here.
And Mayor Gilmore.
Here.
Thank you. May I read the AB 23 announcement?
Yes.
Members of the Santa Clara Stadium Authority, Sports and Open Space Authority, and Housing Authority are entitled to receive $30 for each attended meeting. Statement of Behavioral Standards. The City of Santa Clara has adopted a code of ethics and values and behavioral standards for public meetings to promote and maintain the highest levels of conduct. This includes mutual respect, robust discussion, and allowing city business to be done in an efficient and consistent manner. Please note that as the presiding officer, the mayor's direction in matters of process and decorum should be followed, and that use of the gavel indicates all conversations must conclude, and everyone in attendance should come to order and attention. Welcome and thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much. And Vice Mayor Mahan, if you'd like to speak, just jump on in anytime so we can hear your comments. All right, the next is reports of actions taken in closed session. City Attorney?
Council took no reportable actions in closed session.
Thank you. Continuances and exceptions. Any member of the council, staff, continuances or exceptions? Any member of the public? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to our consent calendar. All items are approved with one motion unless an item is pulled for discussion. Is there any member of the, first of all, the council that would like to pull an item for discussion?
I have
Councilmember Davis.
1F, please.
So Councilmember Davis is pulling item 1F, and that item is action on an agreement with Harini Geographics LLC to provide enterprise GIS consulting services.
1G.
You're pulling 1G also? Yeah. 1G, action on the agreement and covenant running with the land deferring public improvements at 2041 Mission College Boulevard and 1900 to 2000 Wyatt Drive.
That's it.
1F and 1G. Anyone else on the council? All right, anyone from the staff, public, would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve
Motion
the
to approve
balance
the
of the
balance
consent calendar?
Second.
So there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that? Okay, please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, and that passes unanimously. Okay, the next item we have after all that is long consent calendar, public presentations. Any items on any member of the public? Do we have any cards for public presentations, Assistant City Clerk? Yes, okay. The first is Vince Rocha and then Kurt Vartan after that. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. Vince Rocha, and I'm here today to invite all of you to join us for our 15th annual Applied Materials Silicon Valley Turkey Trot. Oh, it's a mouthful. Which was founded as and is directed by the Silicon Valley Leadership Group Foundation. Our goal this year is Mission 1 Million. With so much tremendous need in our valley, our goal is to donate $1 million from this year's race alone to 5 local nonprofits that help local families in need. They include the Second Harvest Silicon Valley, Second Harvest of Santa Cruz County, the Health Trust, the Healthier Kids Foundation, and the Housing Trust Silicon Valley. To put our ambitious goal in perspective, for the past 5 years, we have donated annually between $905,000 and $936,000. We'd like to close that gap so we can serve more families in need. One of the main ways we can accomplish this goal is you. Through our Sandhill Property Company Mayor's Cup Challenge, as you know from past years, the Mayor's Cup rewards mayors, council members, and city managers who register for our race, either to be there in person or through our remote runners category for those of you who will be with family during Thanksgiving Day commitments. We've heard from numerous council members that we should also include points for outreach from you and your city. This year, points will be awarded for Turkey Trot-related outreach posts and newsletters, e-newsletters, social media, and other forms of communication. Points are also available if you'd like to champion these efforts on behalf of your council. I'll leave behind our points sheet for further reference. I've shared that with city staff earlier today. And I've also brought flyers and posters. They're in the hall out there, so for anyone here that wants to know about the Turkey Trot, we'd have plenty of flyers out there on the table. And thanks again for your past support of the Silicon Valley Turkey Trot, and please join us on Thanksgiving morning. It is still the best excuse yet for a third slice of pie on Thanksgiving Day.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vince. Thank you. Kurt Vartan, you're next.
Yeah, good evening,
Good evening.
Madam Mayor and Council. It's good to be back here. And I notice you have some new chairs here. That's really cool. Thanks
They're
for
comfortable.
taking care of your audience. I'm here today just to highlight something that's been happening locally in the area with Google's recent announcement of $1 billion towards affordable housing and housing solutions with the community, and with Cisco's original from last year, $50 million. Microsoft, I think, did $500 million, not in this area, but in Seattle. This kind of thing is something that I think cities can help encourage, not through a tax or not through a hammer or not through a stick kind of action, but how can you help cities convene with corporations and businesses in their communities to help solve the problems that is plaguing all of the community, including the corporations themselves. You have some very big players here in Santa Clara. There's a lot of corporate energy here, NVIDIA being one of the largest on the main street down here, but you have other key players in the area. If there's a way to get them excited to help contribute to this cause and this effort, taking lead from how Google's doing that, I would encourage that, and I hope that's something that the cities can really encourage corporations. It's in their best interest, because small businesses like ours and others are just getting squeezed from all sides. And it's not a tax thing. It's not just a rent thing. It's a livability thing in the area for our workers. And our workers, whether it's high-tech workers or service workers, are really having a tough time here. And if there are ways to, they're talking about 20,000 homes the next 10 years or whatever. That's like pretty far out. How can we accelerate that with more money, more engagement, more energy, and more inclusion with corporate funding, community support to help do some of these things. So the landscape here is changing, and I know everybody sees that, and some people like it, some people don't. But I think admission or acknowledgement is part of the first step in getting to the next step. So I hope that we can figure out ways to bring corporate to the table without requiring them via tax or a burden like that. So thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I know some of us individually, some collectively, have gone out to corporations to tell them, you're here in our city, remember that you're here and your employees are here. And it is a responsibility for them to get engaged in the city, whether it's the city, the schools, the areas that are needing some help. I mean, we're all part of the same community, and some are better than others, but they all really need to get involved, because it's the quality of life for their employees as well. So thank you very much for that. Anyone else would like to make a public presentation? Please come forward on anything that's not on the agenda. Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move ahead now to consent items pulled for discussion, and those would be the two items pulled by Councilmember Davis. The first being the item 1F, action on the agreement with Arini Geographics. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. City Manager, I just wanted to have clarification on an updated reports done going through this. I would like to approve this, but I just wanted to add to the fact that I would like to have more updated reports to council as time goes on. That's fine?
For Gaurav, that would be fine. I would recommend that we provide reports either as an informational memo included in the packet as part of the executive director, city manager report out. It does need to be part of the motion if the council wants to consider, but I would recommend on an annual or every 6-month basis if that's the case.
Okay, I was looking at 6 months, but, and you want to do it informally through your media
Unless,
to
if there's
us.
action
Okay.
that needs to be taken,
Okay.
we will present it as part of a report, but otherwise we'll just put it in as an informational memo.
Great. Then, Mayor, I would like to make a motion to staff recommendation 1 and 2 for approval.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion or questions from the council? Any member of the public? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Assistant City Clerk. Please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, and that passes unanimously. The second item, Councilmember Davis, is 1G, action on the agreement and covenant running with the land deferring public improvements at 2041 Mission College Boulevard and Wyatt Drive.
Okay, and on this one, I just wanted to know what the timeline was with the county because we're deferring sidewalks. So where are they on how we're going to, Craig?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Craig Mobeck, Director of Public Works. Specific to the item with the, where's the county at with the sidewalks, so I just wanted to point out a couple things. So this development on the corner of Montague and Mission College is being developed. There was discussion on sidewalks along Montague. Staff talked with the developer, worked with them, also discussed with the county. The reason why these sidewalks are not included in the development is ultimately if they're built on Montague, they will dead end. So if pedestrians are at Mission College in Montague and walk further down Montague, they will hit a stopping point, even if this project constructs sidewalk, because there is nothing further beyond the project. So that was not ideal. Also, the county has plans, as you mentioned, Councilmember Davis, on a future widening. Where they're at right now, they do not have any budget set up to do any sidewalk projects in that area. There is the US 101 interchange project, the Montague widening, that there's a history to that one as well. They were looking at getting some grant fundings that didn't materialize, so the next steps is for them to progress with design, but they do not have a plan for funding on that either at this point.
Okay, I would like to approve staff recommendation on this, but so long as the county is aware that people need to get around mobility, and I'm just concerned that when we defer things, how long is that going to take? And they have a real bad habit of not doing it within a year or 2 years. But I would really like to see this done if we can, from our side, kind of push it a little or find out if when they're going to do the traffic improvements on Montague, because I know that they're supposed to do that, but then again, we have people that like to walk and bike, and so, okay.
Sure.
I'd like to move staff recommendation on this also.
Is there a motion? Is there a second? Motion second. Any discussion from council? Any members of the public? All right, we have a motion second on that. Please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Aye.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We have no other items pulled for discussion. Next, we have our public hearings, general business, item number 2. It's a public hearing, action to accept the 2019 report on the city's drinking water quality program relative to public health goals. And this is a public hearing, so I'm opening it now.
Good evening, Mayor,
Welcome.
Council, City Manager, Gary Welling, Director of Water and Sewer Utilities. I'm here tonight to talk about the report on water quality relative to public health goals. We do this every 3 years. Last public hearing was 2016. So the city is mandated by the state water quality regulations to hold a public hearing. Let me just do that, sorry. To hold a public hearing to present information on the city's water quality program, public health goals, findings, and recommendations. So a little bit about Santa Clara's water quality. We take over 3,000 water quality samples per year. That's managed by our compliance division headed by Mike Vasquez, and they do an excellent job of monitoring not only the regulatory, but taking all these samples, interpreting the results, and submitting the consumer confidence report on a yearly basis. We have over 34 sample stations throughout the city, and those are sampled weekly. Santa Clara's water meets all water quality regulations and standards, state and federal. So a little bit of background on public health goals. They're established by the California Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment, and they've established 89 public health goals. Public health goals and maximum contaminant level goals, exceedances require a report and a public hearing. This report covers calendar years 2016, 17, and 18, And public health goals are neither enforceable nor required to be met by the utility. So they are not regulatory standards. Public health goals are set at a level which does not pose any significant risk to health and which no known anticipated adverse effects on human health occur with an added margin of safety. They're set to intentionally at a level without considering technical feasibility or the cost of achieving the goal. And they're also set, in the case of carcinogens, at a 1 in a million incident rate of getting cancer. So over the lifetime exposure, which is 70 years for the purposes of the goals. So in summary, our public health goals and monitoring results, we've got 4 constituents. The first one is coliform. And these are indicator organisms we sometimes find in the distribution system. There's a maximum contaminant level, which is the regulatory level in the first column, that's set at 5%. Our sampling results over the 3 years range from 0 to 4.1% in any given month. The public health goal is 0%, or in this case, it's the maximum contaminant level goal. Arsenic is naturally occurring in groundwater. It has a maximum contaminant level of 10 parts per billion in the first column. Our sample results show that a non-detect to 4 parts per billion, and the public health goal is 0.004 parts per billion in the second column. Copper and lead samples originate from, we do some monitoring of lead in the groundwater supplies, and those are all non-detect, but copper and lead primarily are samples taken from households, residents in the city. So for the copper, the maximum contaminant level in the first column, I should say the action level in this case, is 1.3 parts per million. So our sample results over the 3 years range from non-detect to 0.92 parts per million. And the public health goal is 0.3. Lead has a maximum contaminant level, I should say, action level again, 15 parts per billion, and our sample results range from non-detect to 5.9. Again, we meet all of the regulatory requirements for those constituents. So the report conclusions, the water utility is not proposing to change its current operations based on the information provided. The city's drinking water meets all state and federal regulatory requirements for safe drinking water. And the benefits of reductions are uncertain, but the costs associated with possible treatment options are significant. The recommendation is that council accept the report on the city's water quality relative to public health goals at the close of the public hearing. And I'm available along with staff if any questions.
Okay, any questions from the council? Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the report, Gary. It's good to know we've got good water. But I hear this question a lot, and it comes up periodically about calcium in the water. Do we have, I mean, does the city put calcium in the water?
So we don't put it in the water, but it does come from the groundwater. So it's, it's naturally occurring. The hardness, with calcium, magnesium, and so the water, if you're in a portion of the city that primarily gets groundwater, because we get our water from 3 sources, you may be likely to have harder water, so you'd have to soften that water. But we don't treat the water, and we don't add calcium or magnesium to the water.
Okay. And then people do have the ability to install units to...
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of vendors. You can have a unit that you add salt, or you can buy the unit already charged. So you can soften the water that way too, and then a company will come in and change out your unit, your softening unit for you, if you don't want to be hassled with the maintenance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor. So Gary, I know that there was a mention of lead found out in a water fixture at Sutter School, and I know I've had some number of inquiries before this report was ready. So did that one reading, at that particular school site, is that Is that reflect the number that we got for lead? So is that like the only, I know that was the only school site. Is that the only location that we really had in the city that we had any concerns about lead?
Yeah, that's the only location that we had, and that was actually not from a drinking fountain. It was from a hand sink. But that fixture was replaced. And we did recently sample the libraries. We did some of our own facilities, all of those were below. All the samples were below the action level of 15 parts per billion.
And that may have been just because that was the case at Sutter was perhaps a really old fixture or something like our pipes or.
Yeah, sometimes, so the fixtures have lead, just similar to the homes. Some of the homes, most of the homes we sampled are all below the 15 parts per billion, but they could be above the method detection limit of 5 parts per billion. But typically that occurs because of the lead solder in the plumbing fixtures. So it's not from our drinking water that's coming in from the distribution system. So it's originating within the home.
Oh, okay, great. All right, thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Watanabe?
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize.
Oh, no
There
problem.
was another one.
Yeah.
Fluoride. Do we have, does the city have fluoride in its water? Because I know that's a common question asked by parents.
Yeah, so our water's blended. So from groundwater, there's no fluoride, but the SFPUC, the water we get from SFPUC, is fluoridated. And Valley Water is looking to fluoridate their water within a couple of years. So that's the imported water we get in the south of the city. So the northern part of the city, a good portion of that water would be fluoridated.
Okay. You said the northern part.
Northern part, yeah, SFPUC.
Mm-hmm.
But it is blended again.
Blended.
Groundwater is blended in with that. So
There's some.
there's some.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Chahal?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the report, Gary. Quick question. I know you do the sampling on behalf of city from different places. Do the residents have a facility they can bring the water and get it sampled, or even by paying or without paying that?
So if there was a concern or a resident, and it does happen during the year, Mike and his group in the compliance division do go out, and on a number of occasions, if someone wanted their water sampled or they had a concern, we could take a sample or explain, what the sample results are in that area. We have 34 sample sites throughout the city, but if there was a concern, yes, we could go out and take that sample.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions from the council. City Clerk, do we have any cards from the public? Okay, this is a public hearing, so if there's any member of the public that would like to speak or have a question on this report, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close public hearing.
Motion second to close the public hearing. Wait, let's close the public hearing first. Okay, please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous to close the public hearing. Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the the 2019 report for the city's drinking water. And with my chemical engineering background, I really enjoyed reading this report and have had the opportunity to tour some of the city water facilities, and I feel very good about that.
Great. Do we have more reports to give to her? She enjoyed that one. So let's dig a little deeper, right?
It was fun.
Thank you, Councilmember Hardy. That's reassuring to know that
It is.
you gave it your stamp of approval. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that? Please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Aye.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Gary, for your report. Our next item is also a public hearing. It's the action on appeal of Architectural Committee approval for the property at 2892 Sycamore Way. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Because this property is within 1,000 feet of my home, I will have to recuse myself on this item, so I will be leaving the dais.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Go finish your cookies.
And this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. And okay, we're off. Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm Rena Brio, Planning Manager and Community Development. Tonight's item is an appeal of the Architectural Committee's approval of a residence at 2892 Sycamore Way. Currently on the site exists a one-story, 4-bedroom residence with 2 bathrooms. And the Architectural Committee on June 19th approved the demolition of the existing residence and the construction of a new 2-story, 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath residence with 3 points of access to that residence. The property owner has appealed the Architectural Committee's decision specifically to allow the approval of 1 additional bathroom and 1 additional exterior access beyond what the Architectural Committee approved. For some project history, on March 2nd, the property owner filed this application and initially proposed a new residence with 5 bedrooms, 5.5 bathrooms, and 6 exterior access points and 2 new balconies. Staff worked with the applicant in order to improve the front facade, adding some architectural treatments, as well as providing some compatible roof lines. The Architectural Committee heard this item at 2 different meetings, first on April 17th and then on June 19th. There were approximately 20 community members that were present, and they focused mostly on this particular property's high volume of short-term rental activity. They were concerned that the number of bathrooms as well as the number of entrances would be conducive to continue this high volume short-term rental activity. Also, there were present some immediate neighbors who were concerned about privacy impacts from the 2nd story of the residence, as well as the 2 proposed balconies. At the June 19th hearing, the Architectural Committee approved the project but had some changes to what was originally proposed. They reduced the number of bathrooms, they reduced the number of accesses, as well as reduced 1 of the balconies, so only 1 balcony was approved, and required that the 2nd story windows that face the side neighbors have a 5-foot tall windowsill height. The applicant has filed the appeal once again to add an additional full bathroom and an additional access specifically to bedroom number 1 beyond what was originally approved. And the property owner has justified this, citing that 4.5 bathrooms is common in the immediate neighborhood. She's looked at the committee's past approvals and has seen that 4 bathrooms is often approved, that accessing the master bedroom, the rear yard that is from the master bedroom, is also very common, and that she has demonstrated some good faith by terminating short-term rental activity on her property. Just summarize, because there's been some changes with what was shown with the initial proposal, what the AC approved, and then what the current appeal is in front of you. I'm going to focus on the bathroom and the exterior accesses and how those have changed. So with the initial proposal, the applicant proposed 5.5 bathrooms. At the AC hearing, 3.5 were approved, and the current proposal for the appeal includes 4.5 bathrooms. Regarding exterior accesses, the initial proposal included 6. The AC approved 3, so that would be an entrance to the front door, an entrance to the rear entering into the family room, and then a doorway into the garage. And the applicant has requested 1 additional entrance off the master bedroom. You can see the floor plans on the 1st floor, and you can see what was proposed at the AC, which showed 6 total entrances, and the Architectural Committee only approved 3. You can see the 3 that were not included in their approval. And the applicant's proposal, which is on the right, showing their proposed addition of a new entrance to bedroom number 1 and the addition of a 4th full bathroom. The 2nd floor plan is not proposed to change with this appeal. So the Planning Commission heard this item, this appeal, on August 14th, and they weren't able to bring forward a recommendation to the city council. And a large reason for this is because two of the planning commissioners, Chair Becker and Commissioner Kelly, abstained from the hearing because they themselves had participated in the original architecture committee's decision and wanted to provide due process for the planning commission decision. So that meant that only 4 planning commissioners participated and they needed a unanimous vote in order to move a recommendation forward. There was a lot of discussion at that hearing, a lot of community members present, and the planning commissions did discuss 2 conditions that I wanted to elevate for all of you. First is that they proposed adding a condition that an inspection would be required 2 years after the building permit was finalized. And the intention behind that is really for the city to be able to get entrance into a property, to be able to ground truth and make sure that the property was indeed built per the approved plans and that nothing had been modified after that original approval. And they also suggested making a condition so that bedroom number 1, perhaps allowing that entrance, but making it so that it was non-lockable from the outside. And the thought behind this was so that it wouldn't be its own private entrance, that an individual coming in from the residence could access the backyard, but someone couldn't get a key and use that as a private entrance. So reducing perhaps the concerns of exacerbating short-term rental activity on this property. So staff has analyzed this project on a couple fronts. First, regarding the project design. So the proposal is consistent with the city's design guidelines in terms of massing, form. The number of bathrooms and bedrooms are consistent with properties that have large lots, such as this one. This lot is over 11,000 square feet in size. The development standards are also consistent with the single-family residence, the setbacks, the height. Nothing here is requesting a modification or a variance. They're meeting those development standards. Since posting the agenda, we have received a communication from a neighbor that is located on Prune Ridge. They are concerned about potential lines of sight from the proposed balcony to their rear yard in which they have a pool. That correspondence has been provided to the city council, and the applicant is going to be addressing that in their presentation, and we can take follow-up questions after they provide some information. Regarding short-term rental activities, so staff provided a study session on October 8th to the Planning Commission and to the City Council regarding staff's direction and sought feedback on recommendations to short-term rental regulations. So right now, the zoning code has no regulations on short-term rental. Staff's proposal included really tightening up the limitation on the number of days that someone could have a short-term rental and it be unhosted, meaning that a permanent resident was not present, and that would have significant repercussions for an activity if it were to occur again on this property, in terms of the city being able to address that after the zoning code updates inclusion of this particular regulation. The applicant has also demonstrated that as of July 2019, they have stopped short-term rental activity on this property. The construction of this new residence would also, by the fact that construction is very disruptive, given that you're tearing down an entire structure, would also in the short term cease any potential for short-term rental activity while that construction is occurring. Staff thinks that the Planning Commission recommendations are actually good ones in trying to address in the near term, how do we develop some additional considerations for the short-term rental activity until our zoning code catches up with those regulations. And so staff is also recommending adding a condition in which a required inspection after 2 years of final building permit would be added, and also that the entrance to bedroom number 1 would be not lockable from the outside. Staff has asked the applicant if they are comfortable with these conditions, and they have accepted them. We have updated the conditions of approval and provided them to the council before the meeting. So this takes us to the staff recommendation to council, which is to adopt the resolution to sustain the appeal and modify the decision of the Architectural Committee of June 19th, 2019 to allow a residence of 5 bedrooms and 4.5 bathrooms with an exterior access for bedroom number 1 that is not lockable from the exterior, subject to the condition of an inspection 2 years after building permit final. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. I have a question about the balconies. Is it still, are they proposing 2 balconies? Did you show us a picture of the
I
balconies?
didn't. I do have a slide that could show that.
I would like to see what
Yeah.
that looks like.
So there were originally 2 balconies that were proposed, one to the north and one to the south. The architectural committee eliminated the balcony to the north. The one to the south is what you are seeing. Included in that is a 5-foot wall. That's the red highlighted line there. That is also part of the approval of the architectural committee in order to really deal with the line of sight to the particular neighbor in question, which was the immediate neighbor to, I would say, the east of the property.
So there is just one balcony, that's it, with the wall?
Correct.
Okay.
The wall is currently only on the south side of the balcony.
Okay. All right. All right, thank you. Any council questions before we hear from the applicant?
Yeah, can I?
Yes, Councilmember Davis.
Rena, while you're there, so the letter that we received, does that balcony have a sight line to, what is it, 3001 Prunridge?
Right. So the applicant does have some information they're going to provide regarding what they believe is the sight line. Staff hasn't had the opportunity to verify this information and wanted the applicant to present it. I think they think there are some trees that provide some coverage, but I'll let them provide that answer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council before we go to the applicant?
Later.
Okay, so if we could hear from the applicant now. Thank you. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So I just want to share, because the city staff already introduced the project, I just give a little bit more background. So we bought the house last year in August, and we're planning to demolish the house and build the proposed project. And in order to help out the kind of a mortgage, because we know the planning take about 6 to 8 months, so we rent it out for a flat fee. But because as a tenant, they use it as an Airbnb, we found out later. So we, before the April, the hearing, we just like have communication with the police department and all the neighbors here. But then after the April hearing, so I just first time to meet with all the neighbors and get their concerns. Then we scheduled a meeting, met in May. We just like I share what I try to build a house for my family, and also listen from the neighbor their concerns. Then I started working with the tenant, try to terminate the lease earlier. But because it's not unlawful to do the Airbnb in Santa Clara right now, so it takes time for me to be able to terminate with a kind of minimal damage financially for myself. And finally, I reached agreement with my previous tenant. I terminated the lease earlier in July. Original lease will end in September. So after that, so I think that's kind of the background. And also, I want to say there's kind of a miscommunication when I second time come to the June meetings. Some of the neighbors feel like already committed to already agree with the 3.5 bathroom, but actually it's not. It was not me. I got an instruction from city to see, because the instruction from April meeting is kind of approval for 3.5 baths, so I have to submit still the same, but during meeting, I can appeal to say I still want to present 4.5. So this caused some confusion, but it was clarified at the meeting in August. And so here I want to mention, so one thing is about, look at the plan here, the pool mentioned the privacy here, it's actually on the south of the east. On the south side. And also there are 2 trees, big tree on the south side. If you can see, that's a big tree in the between. And also there's another lemon tree. So those the trees will stay even after the demolish the house, build a new one. The 2 trees will still be there and will block the vision. And also the pool is all the way to the fence. It's not a kind of direct direction we can see. So that's kind of information I want to add. And also another thing I want to mention, so I really want to this is really kind of nice community, neighborhood, and I really want to put my effort, be able to good resident in this neighborhood. So I will try to do my best with kind of the reasonable and not hardship on me to work with all the neighbors. So after that, recently I just rented out to a family, and after I signed the lease, I sent an email to all the neighbors, whoever have concerns about my property, and let them know. So currently, who is occupied the house, they are kind of two brothers with three little baby, so lived there. And so just say, and if you have any concerns or questions, feel free to reach out to me. So here I want to make a statement here to say, one thing is about the design of the house. We want to follow the rule of whatever the city code make sure the design is meet all the requirements. And second, as a resident of the house, I will follow whatever the regulation is here. And I'll also do my best to try to address what is the concern from neighbors and with a reasonable accommodation. And so the third, I want to add on the balcony. Currently, the one balcony actually is on the top of the first floor, the house, the bedrooms. There's no actual building out. It's just on top of the first floor master bedroom. And also, let me see. Yeah. I think that's all the information I want to give.
Okay, I have a couple questions, but let me go to the council. Does the council have any questions of the applicant? Councilmember Davis.
When I read this, I read your letter, and you said that you needed the extension of the square footage in your garage for an exercise space and storage that meets the needs of my family. So I'm assuming that you're going to live in this house?
Yes.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay. And you've owned the property even though it was a B&B? Did you know it was the Airbnb or?
No, when we signed the lease, because I rented out for flat fee, so I don't know my tenant will run it as Airbnb.
Okay, because to me, I thought being the owner of the property, that you lived there, and then it turned into an Airbnb, and I know we don't have that on our books, but for the people, that's a very single-family kind of neighborhood, and just by being a good neighbor, the disruption that came from all these people coming in and going out and whatever was happening, I think created a real problem for the neighbors in that direct area, because they were under the assumption it was a single family, it's their neighborhood. But if you didn't know that these people were doing this, I'm kind of concerned, because when I look at how this is built, it looks for an entrance and 6 entrances that you asked for, to me, looks like another Airbnb if everybody has a way to get in and get out. So I was just curious. I just read your letter. You said you were going to live there with your family. But I do understand the concerns of the people that live in this neighborhood because of the disruption. It's just not nice. It's not neighborly to have this stuff going on. But my next question was, why did you want the exit to be locked on the down? You said you cited other single-family areas that had a bedroom that walked out onto the backyard or something. You wanted an entrance. So I was curious about that. How many homes have you found in that neighborhood have that? Does that exist? Because you said you did research on that.
So first of all, the first questions. So when I rented out, I'm not living in that house. I just rented to my tenant, but they didn't tell me they're gonna use that Airbnb. So later on, when we find out, I always put my effort to negotiate, because at that time it's not unlawful to do so. So it's not a kind of intention to do it as an Airbnb. And the secondary, last meeting, I asked the tenant to show the Airbnb record. So actually, it's about 4 people long-term stay there, and probably like 2 or 4 people, between 2 or 4 come and go. So that's kind of how many people stay in that house. So that's for the first question. And for the second question, so current existing structure, they do have 4 entrances, which means there are 2 doors to the backyard. So actually currently after the discussion, we already accept and just keep the currently full access to the whole backyard, right? One from the front entrance, one side for garage, and to the backyards. And also originally for my proposal, I didn't request to say it should be lockable. It's a kind of concern they added to say it should not be lockable. I accepted last meeting. So there's no intention for me to say have to be locked from outside.
Okay, and then I got to get back to the neighbor that has an issue with you overlooking, this balcony overlooking the pool. And I can understand that. But I guess, Arena, you said you're going to investigate that because, you know, I'm looking at trees here and you can see through trees. So I'm just concerned that what is the line of sight?
I can answer maybe when you're done with the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Okay. That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Other council members? I have a couple of questions of the applicant because I'm a little confused because a lot of the issues that you're experiencing right now is because of how the house was used in the past and the nuisance to the neighborhood based upon the multiple, users of that property in and out. I think it was more than 2 or 4 people based on the sheer number of complaints we got about this particular property during that time. You talked about that you leased it out to someone on a flat rate. I don't know what that means, but if you had any kind of rental agreement or something, I doubt it said that they could go and then rent it again. So my question is, you must have had, as a property owner, some kind of knowledge of how your property was being used, unless you live, out of the area. So that nuisance went on for quite a long time in that neighborhood. So I think that now that you're going to experience a lack of trust of the neighborhood, that you are not going to repeat what happened in the past with the way the property was designed. So I think that, you may look at other properties in the neighborhood, and we take everything on a case-by-case basis, but you may look at other properties and say, oh, they got 4.5 or 5 baths and they have all these entrances. We have to look at this particular property, how it was used, how it's planning to be used, and the impacts on the neighborhood as well. So a lot of these issues are coming up because of the way this property has been owned and managed. So I'm curious about this lease. You said it's a flat rate lease. Well, most leases are. So what do you mean by a flat rate lease?
A fixed amount, which means every month I got the fixed amount of money for the rental. So it doesn't matter how much they rented out. Yeah. Or there's no one rented the house for Airbnb. So
you're saying you didn't get a percentage above because they rented out an Airbnb?
Yeah.
Were you aware were you knowledgeable? Do you live in this area? Were you knowledgeable of how this house was used? And were you not contacted that it was a nuisance to the neighborhood?
Okay, so first, when my previous tenant, they want to rent a house, I was told they will rent a house on behalf of a big company, and the big company will kind of have a house to settle, make arrangement for the expatriate. So since I was used to be expatriate, my company find a house for me to stay. So that's why I think it's fine, because expatriates typically stay kind of at least 1 year, sometimes 2 or more years. So that's why I agree upon that, because my previous company, we do rent a lot of house or apartment for all the expatriates. So this is how my understanding. I know they are not a rent for family, but since they explain as expatriate, so that's why I accepted. But later on, I find out it's not like what they said. So I did consult with an attorney to say, is there any way for me to, just like end of the lease, kind of a proper way? But I was told by attorney to say, since right now they didn't violate any regulation, and also there's no way to repay any damage if I end the lease earlier. So, but the amount they are asking is kind of way too much, which I cannot afford it. So that's why it took a little bit longer time for me to negotiate with the tenant. Yeah.
Okay, so I hope you can understand that there's going to be a lot of questions about this property because of the way it was used and the way it's designed. And I personally am also concerned about making sure that the entrances from the outside cannot be accessed by a key, so you don't have all these separate entrances, so that the house cannot be used as a Airbnb boarding house,
Yeah, for sure.
in this neighborhood. And Although we can't put a condition that you have to live there with your family, we have to make sure that, that the neighborhood is protected as well when we look at this property and how it's designed. So, Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. You asked a lot of questions that I had, but I also have, pointing out, there was a picture of what the house, is it what it looks like now? It's like a single story. And when you look at what you are intending to do with the house in terms of renovation, you've gone from a single family to a mansion. So, that definitely would raise a lot of concerns, especially if it was being used as an Airbnb. But I also have a question. Who pays for the public utilities? Who pays for the electric and water and the garbage removal? Whose name is all of that in?
So, okay, actually it's my tenant, but during the break, 3 months, because I ended the lease early in September. From September to October, I pay for that. But currently, since I have a new tenant just moved in, so they're supposed to pay for that.
It's in their name?
Yeah, in their name.
Okay, so you have no idea like how much water, electric is being used. That would give you an idea of like that there's a lot of people living in this house.
I do know the figure, but because they share with me, and also I will check. It's about for the past the highest time is about $200 or $300.
Wow, because Santa Clara's got pretty low electric rates, so that's why I'm asking. Okay, okay, okay. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do have the same concerns, like past history is not reflecting very good what has happened in the past. And one question brings is, the current tenant you have, did you stipulate in the terms and conditions of the lease that they cannot do Airbnb or sublease of the house?
Yeah, I make it very clear. And also I share with my current tenant as a history what happened in the house. I explain to them why I need them to list all the name who will stay there, and even the children, 1 to 2 year baby. I just say expand the history. I don't want that happen again. And the tenant will put in the agreement that only all the people have name on that can stay the house. Other than that, they need to let me know. In front. And also the tenant have a confirmation to me to say for sure no Airbnb. And also he will try to make a good relationship with the neighbors. So.
And the second thing about the privacy on the back, can you consider like putting more like real dense canopy of green trees or something, which you can make sure there is no privacy concern for the neighbor on the back?
Okay, can we just show the floor plan? Okay. Okay. Okay, so first we want to move back to this one. You can see my house, the current design is kind of further from the seas. So if in the middle of the south, it's kind of 15 feet. If in the corner, even further from my neighbor. So this is for overall plan. And also for the north, the current one is about 10 feet, but right now it's about 13 feet from the fence. So which means my house, the whole design kind of shrink and moving forward, kind of further away from both sides of the neighbors. And then if you look at this picture, you can see the pool is on the south side, which is the neighbor risk concern. But you can see the pool is really on the right side of the seas. And my house will build on trailer like this way. It's not on the direct direction. And also on the south of my balcony already have a 5 feet high wall. So it's not kind of the direct vision to that. And by the way, there are 2 trees on the south side of that will block the view. So yeah, so that's my explanation. And also, this is kind of a perception from the balcony you can see. And this is kind of the trees. So that's a tall tree, avocado tree, and now on the right side is a lemon tree. So that's kind of direction we're coming toward the pool on the upper corner. And so here you can see that that's the red arrow is actually the balcony, but the pool really you cannot see from this kind of the angle. Yeah.
So my concern is not the pool on the south side, but even the other neighborhood. Like if you're just trying to do fix one thing, I'm trying to fix the whole of the back neighbors basically.
Yeah, so actually this is a picture, the neighbor on my north side, they do have a balcony. You can see there's no anything, the wall built up. So I'm fine with that. Those is and there are 2 trees. This is for the spring. The leaf is not thick, but right now the leaf block the view completely. So this is my next to on the north side, the neighbors. Yeah. And so those 2 pictures, that's the current tree, the avocado tree on the south side will block the view with my neighbor on the south side. And then this is a lemon tree. Well, on the way, supposed to see the other neighbors, kind of which have a pool over there. So that's the kind of situation.
So what I'm saying is you look at the area in between, that you see a tree on the top and a couple of those trees on the bottom, right? And in between of that, there is clear line of sight from your balcony to the neighborhood. That's what I'm concerned with. Like, can you make sure we have another green canopy of tree, whatever staff suggests you, we can, so that you have a full line of trees over there and you cover the line of sight from the back neighbors?
You mean plant another tree or
Yes.
how many trees?
Depending upon like how you can cover the line of sight for the back neighbors.
Okay, but previously we do propose to say build a tree along all the fence and without putting the wall. But finally, the neighbor concerns the tree can be removed, right? So then we come to an agreement to see just add the 5-foot high wall. So that's kind of the discussion.
Yeah, because that neighbor is active and there is the issue. So you're trying to fix that problem. But I'm talking about, because this thing goes with the land. Unless it's somebody next comes in the back of your house where you don't have any canopy, and they raise that issue. So we want to cover that issue proactively for them. That's the reason I'm asking.
But is that, okay, so is that kind of a concern only for my house or for my 5 neighbors too? Because I see my neighbors, both neighbors here, they are all 2 floors. They don't build a tree on that line. It's all very clear view, right? And also my neighbors just next to here, they have a balcony. They can see through to my yard. I think that's a situation I can accept it. And I just say, yeah, I say just like the vote here to say treat everyone fair, right? I think you have to address all the neighbors' concerns. I do want to make a accommodation to address all the concerns, but I also want to be treated fairly. If all the 2 neighbors, they are 2 floors, right? They don't build all the trees, plant all the trees alongside. Why I have to? Currently, I already address the major concerns. Already have 5 trees along the side can block the view, and also will build a 5-foot high wall. So I think that's my consideration. I already put in my efforts.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other council questions, so thank you very much. Just stay put because we're going to call you back up after the public has a chance to speak. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we're going to go to members of the public. I have a few cards here. We'll start with Donna Garcia, and then if Joe Garcia can queue up, and Jerry Campy after that. Please come forward. Okay, okay. No, that's fine. You have a chance. Yes.
Okay,
Go
yeah.
ahead, please. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me this evening. You know, I'm just mainly concerned, you know, she wants us to be welcoming to her. We'd love to welcome her into the neighborhood. But she has not cut the lawn, watered the lawn. That place looks disgusting. Am I correct?
Oh, please address the council
I'm
up here.
addressing you.
Thank you.
Just do the drive-by. It just looks, she has done nothing to that yard. It's really embarrassing. People come over and say, God, we still haven't got rid of the Airbnb. And I said, yes, they have. They just haven't maintained the yard. I sent you photos. I sent to staff members, Stephen Lee, a copy of the photos. And I'm concerned again about the balcony. And if you can take care of that, I'd really appreciate it, about the privacy factor. That's all I have to say. I can't answer any questions. I have an appointment at 7:30 and I must leave. Okay, thank
Well,
you.
thank you very much for
Okay,
coming
thank you so much. But
and
I'd love you to
speaking.
drive by there and check it out. It looks disgusting.
Thank you. Jerry Campy and then Donna Garcia.
I live at 517 Bancroft Street, down the street from 2892 Sycamore. Two things I want to say. First off, one, the depth of the balcony is 8 feet deep. Take a look at the depth of that balcony. Perhaps that would be something to consider. And second, her current tenants, some of our neighbors have met them. They're a wonderful couple. They were under the impression they have a 6-month extendable lease. They did not know what's going on. We pointed out the sign on the post. The remodel proposal at 2892 has definitely followed an uncommon trajectory. We as neighbors have always just wanted our nice family neighborhood to return to what it was prior to October 2018, when the 18-bed, rented individually, Airbnb, moved into the house. Thankfully, the short-term rental did stop at the end of July. Having had that experience, the neighbors are quite concerned that any rental in the neighborhood may once again be used as a short-term rentals. We are very involved in the current zoning redo. We're very vocal about it because we know what can happen to a neighborhood. The first proposal was 5-bedroom, 5.5 bath, with each bedroom having its own bathroom, basically 5 master suites. That proposal was concerning to all the neighbors because of the history as a short-term rental. Current proposal is for 2 master suites, which is much more acceptable, but many of us still feel that 4.5 bathrooms for a 5-bedroom house is excessive. Current plans show a closet upstairs that is the exact same dimensions as the bathroom across the hall. The closet also has a window and shares a wall with the laundry room. The shared wall has a water supply and sewer line. We appreciate the condition of an inspection 2 years post-final. I would request that something be specifically written into the resolution to state that no additional bathroom will be added to the upstairs of this residence. Again, our concern is that this house not be used as another large-scale short-term rental, whether it's by the current owners or a future owner. I'd like to point out also there is an error in the resolution. It states that it is currently a two-story house being torn down, being replaced by a 2-story house. It's not. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-story house being replaced by a 2-story house. Thank you very much for consideration.
Donna Garcia. Now it's your turn. Welcome.
Good evening, the council. Thank you for listening, and I'm trusting that the council will consider all of our uncertainties. Unfortunately, I live right next door, and it screams hacker house all over again. Being blunt, it's been a hell of a ride. Sleepless nights, stressed, and feeling unsafe every day in the past year. As you have heard, 2,000 people have stayed in the house in a 10-month period, plus on the street until it is next door to our house. You have no idea until, and I hope you never have to see that in your neighborhood. With that being said, my husband and myself have a very small yard that faces next door to Jane. One's a 2nd-story balcony overlooking our backyard. We are hoping the council will consider having a 6 to an 8-foot wall. Since I'm 5'5", I could see right over. And the trees she was talking about, they could die or she could cut them down. And the lock on the stairs, I don't understand why there's a stairs. I've never heard of that, having a stairs coming from your 2nd story. And she could change the lock in a minute. So again, I see another larger hacker house, not an Airbnb, but a hostel being built for future use. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I don't have any other cards. If you'd like to speak, please come forward. Good evening.
I'm Paul Krager.
Could you speak right in the microphone so everyone at home can hear you? Thank you.
I'm Paul Krager. I'm living at the other end of Sycamore Way in Magnolia Lane. To this, I've written that I'd hoped to give to Steve Lee tonight before this meeting, but it's a letter for Steve Lee from myself. Subject is emergency vehicle access to 2892 Sycamore Way. Steve, in view of all of the concerns for this property, it appears to me that the subject emergency vehicle access to this property has been overlooked. Plain and simply, the marked up attached Google map that's here clearly shows the convergence of this lot with this lot's property lines as it approaches Sycamore Way, and in fact, only slightly wider than the street entrance to the driveway. One of the charts that you saw up here is like I've got here from Google Maps, but the property line converges, the two sides converge towards Sycamore Way. It is currently being demonstrated by the Northern California fires that unobstructed access to any and all situations is best handled by evacuating potentially affected residents. This then allows first responders to do their job in the most efficient way possible. I wish to recommend that 2892 Sycamore Way project authorization documentation specifically include in writing that the first responders' street entrance to the driveway shall never be obstructed by any unattended motor vehicle, trailer, or any other immovable objects or materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krieger. Anyone else? Please come forward. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councils. My name is Hamdi Abdigawad, and I've been resident in the great Santa Clara city for 40 years. I'm the one living on Prune Ridge, which have the pool, and all the other issues that I've heard, I was not even concerned of them because this is the first time I heard. I have not received any notice that there was a hearing before that. I only received the one that I have in my hand, which is on the 18th of this month, October. And I had to look at it when I came back from Phoenix. And anyway, I wrote a small letter that you probably have a copy of.
We have it, yes, thank you.
The only problem I have, since I have 7 daughters and they are with Muslim faith and they covered, and that's why when I was looking for a property to purchase in '96, I got that property because I had the 4 backyard, on each other, so there is no, I have good privacy there. So I invested the $150K to put a pool and the yard and everything back there for my kids. Now, I did not know that there is going to be a 2-story building, and especially the balcony. The balcony, it's, yes, there's sometimes the tree have some privacy, but the trees in the time of August, or I mean in November, the leaves fall and they can see through. So I'm not really sure what can we do about the balcony. The windows, I understand that they had 2 windows, 3 by 3, but it's about 5. But the balcony is like active place that you're gonna go outside, and it's probably big balcony too. I think it's about 10 times 8, 10 times 12. 10 feet by 12. It's very big balcony. So maybe they have to look at to reduce it, and the wall maybe to be a little bit higher instead of 5 foot higher a little bit, or maybe reduce it and have the railing go back a little bit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your letter. Anyone else? Please come forward if you'd like to speak. Okay. Seeing that there's no other members that would like to speak, I'm going to ask the applicant now if you'd like to make comments based upon It's 5 minutes.
Okay, so I answer questions. The first mentioned about the 6 months lease. So actually, when I posted the advertisement, it's a 1 year lease. But my tenant and he gonna negotiate it to say because they just relocated to this area and before they moved into the house, they stay with their brother in a kind of a small apartment. They haven't had any experience living in a single house, so they check with me whether I'm flexible, give them 6 months to try, but they are kind of planning to stay longer. So I think since they are kind of both kind of brothers with kind of children, I think fine, I can give you flexibility. But for me, just like 6 months or 12 months, I'm okay with that. So that's for explanation. And also I share with the tenant the history, what happened in the house, and also what's my intention. But I told him to say nothing happened very soon, will take a long time, and there's no any urgency on that part. And second, about mentioned to see 2,000 people have stayed in the house. Actually, I shared the kind of Airbnb record print out from Airbnb website. It's just show the it's about from May to from May to July each week, which bed is occupied. That's what I say, four people long stay and another 2 or 4 people come and go. So this is how I provide the proof. And so mentioned about stairs to the balcony, I don't understand. There's no any stairs can either go from the house, but there's no any stairs from outside can come to the balcony. And then about the pool, I just mentioned that I just do my effort, and also I think the impact is minimal. And if you look at the red fin, actually this is my property, this is my neighbors. Actually the pool, if you see the line, it's more lean on this side. This is a 2-story too. So my house we're building facing this direction. And also there's a 5-foot-high wall block the view. So it's not any way kind of direct see-through to the pool. Okay, so that's my comments.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm gonna ask now, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second to close the public hearing.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Aye.
Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously with those present. So next, is there any comments, questions, motion?
Okay. Mayor,
Councilmember Davis?
I would like to make a motion, but Rena, is there some way that we can address the concerns of the resident on Prune Ridge? Because the lemon trees, okay, so we all have trees. My lemon tree, you can see right through the thing. It doesn't get that high. So I'm really concerned about how that, if his pool is heated, they could be there, right now. We live in California. It's one of those things where it's probably a usable pool through the, 12 months. So if you could, I don't know if we have to add an amendment onto that where you double check that sight line with the trees. I want to approve staff recommendation, but I want to add that on. I want that to come back somehow where we know that there is no line of sight whatsoever into that man's yard.
Can we have staff recommendation put up on the screen? Do we have a slide that has, so we all know what we're talking about, what staff recommendation actually is?
Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So
Thank you.
we're upholding the appeal. But the only thing is that this is come to our attention. So I really want to, the line of sight and figure out how that all works for us. If you can do that investigation, that would be great, because you said you didn't have time to do it, so I really appreciate that. And the simple fact that someone else brought up another thing that, do we go back in and find out if the door can be locked or not locked on that first floor? Or, I mean, how is this written in? Is there like a checklist kind of like when we do conditions of approval? I mean, is that what we're talking about to add on to this? Or how do you want this framed?
Correct. So first, perhaps related to the line of sight issue, staff received and I will just show them to you very briefly, the slides that the applicant provided and she shared with you. We weren't necessarily, it wasn't obvious to us that there would be no line of sight from the landscaping that was provided, and also knowing trees can be deciduous, lose leaves. If the council is really interested in protecting the privacy, perhaps a condition could be added where additional trees, for instance, that Councilmember Shahal suggested, be planted along the rear of the property, and that a condition be required that should those trees die or be removed, they need to be replaced and maintained in healthy standards so that that would live and run with the property. So that's something that would provide, I think, greater certainty that a line of sight would be
Yes.
prevented.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that because I think that will satisfy Prune Ridge. The other thing is that when we pass the new zoning with the Airbnbs or whatever, does that grandfather into this, or how does that?
We are proposing that upon the effectiveness date of either the zoning code, or perhaps we will provide some additional timing to provide property owners some additional information, notification, but there is no proposal to grandfather in existing practice of short-term rentals.
Okay, so it can, all right. All right, so let's get with the line. I'm approving
Can we
staff
go back to the
recommendation.
recommendation? Put it up, please.
Yeah. I'm approving staff recommendation with the line of sight
Thank you.
issue to be addressed. Is that
Okay,
clear
that's
for
a
council?
motion.
Okay, yeah.
For a second.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Other questions, Councilmember Hardy?
I was just going to say the biggest struggle for the council, I think, at this point is we know that landowners have rights to their property, but this landowner violated a basic neighborhood situation of trust. And for that trust to be gained back is going to be very hard once broken. And this is why the council is trying with conditions to uphold the property owner's rights and still protect the neighbors. I think this is where we're trying to, this is not easy because the landowner is going to have to work to gain that trust back. I think that's a reality.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Watanabe and then Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the addition of the trees, and I agree, you know, in order to, you know, based on the concern about the line of sight. But my concern is trees, they die, you know, somebody else mentioned that. If it would be possible, I think it was Ms. Garcia mentioned that, you know, the fence, she's 5.5, she can see over the fence. Is there any way that instead of the trees, that we could look at a higher fence instead as a condition?
Yes, so currently there is a wall that's 5 feet tall on the southernmost portion of the balcony. If the council was interested in extending that wall so that it ran along the length of the balcony parallel to the rear neighbors, that's something to consider as well. Currently, it's 5 feet tall.
Right.
If the council was interested in making it taller, that's also a possibility.
There are 6-foot fences, and I think in terms of in the long run that it would be more sustainable to have a fence as opposed to trees based on just our environmental concerns these days, that maybe a fence might be another alternative, a more viable alternative.
Councilmember Watanabe is talking about something different than you're talking about, Rena. Aren't you talking about the wall on the balcony? She's talking about fences on the ground.
Fencing on the ground.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, yes. I was thinking about the balcony. So thank you for the clarification, Mayor.
Okay. I just want to make sure that you know what each other's talking about. All right. Thank you. Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do agree that we can increase the height of the wall on the balcony. And if you can look into it, I'm not sure what the exact dimensions of the balcony are, 10 by 8, or I got some different numbers over here. If we can keep it reasonable so that it reduces the impact, mitigate the privacy issues on that. And I do think the short-term rental ordinance will help the neighborhood to come up with that. And I would suggest the neighborhood, whosoever came today or who have suffered from this thing, to participate in that new ordinance so that we can make it stringent enough so that nobody can misutilize the renting part of such houses. So please do participate in that and give your ideas what can be done so that we make a foolproof ordinance down the line. And my other thing is, yeah, I would certainly agree with Councilmember Watanabe's idea, and that should be in addition to the green canopy, increase the height of the fence all around. I don't know what would be appropriate that. I would say the staff can decide what's appropriate so that we can have that.
Okay, thank you. I had a question. I just want to make sure there's no exterior staircases. Okay, just want to clear that up.
No, I think looking at the plans, people might be confusing the trellis with the staircase.
Okay, because that would lead to an outdoor, ingress and egress when you do that. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and support the motion with these, with the addition to the motions. I know there's many two-stories. I live in a neighborhood where the two-story behind me looks exactly directly into my yard and my neighbor's yards. I wish the council at that time would have given me the protections that they didn't. So I suffer now. So I understand what that's about. So I think that we've done as many protections, but I think as good faith, I'm hoping the property owner is listening, that the exterior apparently of the property is in horrendous condition. And part of being a good neighbor is taking care of your property and making sure the outside, although we can't, advocate here or vote for you to mow your lawn, but I'll tell you, there's been such bad faith in that neighborhood from the use of this property, and I have a very difficult time believing you didn't know it was an Airbnb with all those tenants in and out, but I have to, give you the benefit of the doubt what you said. But I think that it's going to be a long road to get the trust of the neighbors back to make sure that you do act as a good neighbor in our neighborhoods. I mean, it's really important that we're responsible in that respect. So I'm going to go ahead and approve or vote for the motion, and hoping that, this is the beginning of some good relations with the neighborhood and really taking care of your property. I'm hoping that you've listened to everyone that's been here this evening. Councilmember Watanabe, do you have more to say?
Just going to second the motion because
It was already seconded, so.
Thank you very much.
Very good. All right, so we have a motion, and it's Vice Mayor Mahan, do you have any comments on this? Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Madam Mayor, may I verify the motion? I have approved staff recommendation with an added condition required to provide privacy to the line of sight with tree maintenance. Are we adding height to fencing?
I think
Yes,
that
so
we've left, what did you need us specifically to
well,
put
the
something?
one thing is that we are limited to the zoning code unless the council makes an exception. So we would be limited to a 7-foot tall fence unless the council said that an exception to the maximum fence height would be permissible.
Say that one more time, because right now they're proposing a 5-foot fence?
I think that the wall was being confused with the fence. So I
Are we
actually
talking
think
about fences or walls? Are you talking about balconies or fences? I thought we were talking
we're
about
talking
fences.
about fences, but
Fence
I don't have the fence height that's proposed. I have the wall height. However, if the issue of line of sight is to be addressed with the fence, staff is limited to what is allowable in the zoning code, which is a maximum of 7 feet.
Right.
So upon our analysis, if a fence as tall as 8 feet would be allowable, it would be advisable that the council would suggest that the fence could go up to a maximum of 8 feet.
I think I'm going to ask the property owner, what is it now 5 foot? I remember there was a speaker that said, I'm 5 foot and I can look over the fence. So if we're going to go to 5 feet to 7 feet, you can go all the way up to 7 feet. Yes, did you have something about just the fence height?
Yeah, so currently on the side of, according to the whole side, there's a dirt. Actually, it's already additional 1 feet high. So all the fence built on top of the 1 foot dirt, and also the lemon tree also planted on that. So it's already higher than the normal one. So
Okay,
just add
but
the
we
fence.
can go a maximum of 7 feet. So that would be, if there's a foot of dirt, then that would be up to 8 feet tall. So we're going to give the staff the authority to use up to the 7 foot based on discretion, working with the property owner. Can we put that in the motion?
Yes.
And
Is that
Madam
okay?
Mayor, are we talking about the increase in the height of the wall on the?
We didn't talk about the wall. We're just talking about the fence height.
Right, but we also brought that up. I also brought that up. Instead of 5 feet, can we make it 6 feet of that wall?
Is that just arbitrary? You're adding a foot? Does that make a difference?
Just because 5 feet, we all are 5
Yeah, but this is
something.
5 feet on a second story, so.
No, but if you're standing in the balcony, you can look above the wall, right? If you're 5 feet. So what I'm saying, if you're 6 feet is much better than 5 feet.
From a geometry point of view, from the math teacher, you're looking line of sight, okay? And it's 52 feet to the back, from the back of the property proposed to the fence. Not going to make that much of a difference.
It won't, so I don't just want to arbitrarily add something for, just because, so. All right, we have a motion with additions to the staff recommendation. Okay, please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan, your vote?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously with those present. Thank you very much. Thank you for the speakers that also came out as well. All right, next item. Oh, we'll wait for Councilmember O'Neill to come back. Thank you for joining us again. The next is action on an agreement for design professional services with Smith Group for consulting services associated with the City of Santa Clara Civic Center concept plan and utility building project. Mr. Pineda.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Manuel Pineda, Chief Electric Utility Officer. Pleasure to be here today to be speaking with you regarding an award of a contract to look at the Civic Center and also a near-term utility building project. Just a quick background for you, and I think we're all very familiar with the site. We're here on a regular basis. Most of the buildings were constructed in the 1960s. We have about 95,600 square feet of office space, and that includes about 12,000 square feet for SVP and water and sewer staff that are located within City Hall. As you know, we have SVP staff located in other buildings as well. That does not include the old police station. As you know, that old police station is fenced in, it's not usable, and there are significant issues with that building where it cannot be reused. One thing we know as well is that the community continues to grow, and as part of that growth, there's an expectation of an increase in demand for city services. We did have a discussion with you back as part of the strategic session, and lack of space was designated as a priority as part of that discussion. So I'm going to go back and just touch on some of those points again. It's been a while since we discussed it. What we talked about, there's a space need now within the city throughout the entire city. Working with Public Works, Craig Mobick, we get continuous requests to reconfigure the existing space. And really where we're at is the staffing needs exceeds where we can put people. In addition to that, I do want to highlight that we do get concerns from staff that we do lack some basic needs. Just to give you an example, what that means is because we don't have kitchen areas that are accessible for everybody, a lot of staff has to use the bathroom sinks, for example, to wash their dishes after lunch because we just don't have those facilities and we don't really have a place for them. In addition, as I mentioned, we do have lease space that we use for staff. We do feel we've been as creative as we can. We have reconfigured spaces as much as we can. Some cases we take in storage areas and converted those to offices, and I'll show you some pictures of that. And we also have department staff sitting in different locations. We recently relocated our building inspectors over there to the brick building that's adjacent to the park fronting on El Camino. So we were able to do that and use that space. This is just an example of kind of a storage space that was converted so multiple people could sit in it. And in the right, this is something we actually looked at last year. And depending on where we're at, we might have to look at again. That's actually one of our vaults. And we looked at the possible conversion of can we relocate those documents, put them somewhere else, and take that vault space. And I really do mean it's a vault with a huge vault door. And could we either convert that into cubicle space or maybe convert it into a conference room and then convert a conference room into cubicle space? But of course, we also have a shortage of conference rooms. So, one thing feeds into the other. So as part of the strategic session, we talked about we needed to develop a new Civic Center master plan to really see what we need to do from a long-term perspective. We also needed to look at a near-term utility building because the council has taken actions in the past to proceed with the utility building. And we told the council we would proceed with an RFP for consultant support for that process, and that's why we're here today, so we can consider that contract award. I do want to touch on the utility building a little more. So there's been previous analysis and previous council action. As part of the most recent council action, there is approved budget set aside, not for the full funding of the building, but there's approved budget set aside for a utility building. We have approximately $18 million in the capital budget already in place. It does provide some issues, solve some issues, and provide some benefits. Right now, we have SVP staff both at Martin Avenue, and we have some staff here, so they're in two different locations. It's not the best from a public convenience perspective. And also, one of the things we want to do is see if we can consolidate some of our 24/7 operations. Right now, we have our power trading group at Martin Avenue, and we have our control operations at the yard, which is not the best setup. If you want to have a 24/7 access, it would be better at one location. One additional benefit is that if we can move forward with a near-term utility building, we could relocate SVP and water and sewer staff to that facility and create additional space. The 12,000 square foot that we talked about earlier could be used for other city uses in other city departments. So what we did is we put out an RFQ, and what the RFQ is supposed to do is it's going to help us develop a concept plan that was going to guide the decision-making process to develop a civic center concept plan and a utility building project in the study area. We released that in April 2019, so we did release it fairly soon after the strategic discussion with 4 primary components. If you saw the scope, it's very, very significant, but it's cost and phasing analysis. So I think the first thing we got to do is have a really frank discussion as to what the funding options would be to be able to, if you wanted to do a full civic center, or how will the project have to be phased into sections that we can actually afford to do. We want to do for you a market analysis so the council understands what options they might have if they wanted to lease property within the Civic Center, if they wanted to sell property within the Civic Center, how they would like to consider doing that, if that's an option as we try to finance a new building. Obviously, community engagement will be a significant part of this, so I want to highlight it. And our needs and what this would look like, it's going to be guided by a very robust architectural and space allocation process that all the city staff are going to be involved in. From a timeline, we released the RFP in April. We got the proposals in May and reviewed those proposals in May. We had 7 proposals. We shortlisted to 4. We had oral presentations from the consultants on July 2nd and 8th, and we have, I was part of that group. We actually had staff from community development, public works, finance, and additional SVP staff as part of the selection process. And Smith Group, who's being proposed for a contract today, was selected unanimously as part of that process. Then we went in contract negotiation process, which we finalized in September of this year, and now we have a contract for your consideration. The consultant team has every possible need that we could have. I'm not going to go to the whole list and throw all the names, but I think the master planning, urban design, and architecture are going to be very important when we look at what our options are. But I always go back and I want to highlight the financial analysis, because what we want to come back to you is come back with a realistic plan of what the city can afford to do and what the city could move forward with in the near term to solve some of those real issues that we have now. It's not something that we'll have in the future, but that we have today. The project approach and process will start by defining the problem. Then we're going to set a strategic direction and ultimately have a plan and implementation. We're looking at late 2021 to be completed. That might shift as we're developing certain things. I do want to go back to defining the problem. And what you'll see in that is we're looking at trying to come back to you in December of this year, which is a very quick time frame. And really what we want to be able to do is come back to you with a financial analysis that really helps guide how we're going to master plan the process. And I'll get into that a little more here. So at the December meeting, we would want to look at financial feasibility. We have done quite a bit of work in the past. So we have a general perspective of what the plans and reports and what our needs are. We need to really tighten those up. We're going to look at what it would mean to do more of an urban facility compared to more of a campus facility. And obviously there's costs associated with that. We want to give you the analysis I talked about, market analysis and land values around the Civic Center property to see if there's any options that council might want to consider for either leasing or selling part of the Civic Center property to help finance a project. And those are just options we would provide for you. And ultimately, we want to develop a cost estimate of what this project would cost. Rough order of magnitude, so you know what kind of dollars we're dealing with. The key outcome of that meeting was to determine the financial feasibility to reconstruct all of the Civic Center campus. And I can tell you right now, to do all the project at once would be very, very, let me do one more, very difficult. Or come in with a phased implementation of kind of what can be afforded now and how we can work with future phasing of the building. I also want to highlight those forward community engagement because I know that's a big process of all the work that we do in the city. We're going to have workshops. We're going to have multiple commission meetings. We're going to come back to you 4 times or more just to have these discussions. Of course, we have CEQA process in here when we select the project, and we're going to go to the CEQA public meeting process, and we're going to use all our social media that we have in the city to communicate with everybody. So with that, what we're recommending today to start the process is to award the contract to Smith Group. Obviously, we're recommending that tonight. We would move forward with advertising our first public open house workshop, and we would have some internal meetings as well to get as much detail as we can before we come back in December. And our goal is to come back December 17th, 2019, this calendar year, to really have that big picture discussion on the financial feasibility, and I like to say financial reality, an economic analysis report that's really going to guide what kind of plan we're going to have, and if it needs to be phased, how it can reasonably be phased over a period of time. So that concludes staff presentation, of course, available for any comments.
So this is the beginning of a long, long process we're talking about?
Yes, it's the beginning. It's the beginning of a process. We're looking at, our goal is to have the master plan and everything done by 2021. And then I think a key decision point along the way will be if we're going to phase the facility, what are we going to phase it? We do know there's options on how to build a utility building. There's multiple options, and we'll let you know what those are. So you could move forward with a near-term utility building project if that's what the council would desire, but this is a long process.
I noticed in the land area, it didn't include the land across the street where the Triton Museum is and the parking lot and all that. Is that not included in the study?
That's not included in the study. Certainly, we could go back if the council was interested for us to include it. We could talk to the consultant and see what that would mean. We did not include it because, of course, the museum's there.
No, I know that,
Yeah.
but still, that we use the parking lot and all, our homes are there. I think it should, this is a large complex, everything should be included.
Okay.
So if that could, it certainly can be an add-on later.
Yeah,
But it should all be included,
Yeah,
in my opinion,
We'll add
when
that
you're
in.
master planning.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and add that, and also as we're doing our financial feasibility, we'll make sure.
And it
to
doesn't
include
mean
it
we're
as well.
moving the museum for anybody that's out there. Don't even think we're not moving the museum.
We do know there are some limitations
Gonna
there,
panic
and we
everybody.
didn't include it initially, but happy we can easily add it to the scope.
But we're not cramped. We have 6 council members and 2 staff members in one room, right? Very cozy. Okay. Councilmember Davis.
So part of this, Manuel, is this with the current employee level, or are we going to benchmark it with new employees?
Yeah.
Because we're already busting at the seams, and we're supposed to change our staffing levels going forward. So are we going to add that into factor, all of this? Because we need places to grow.
Yes, we will be looking at future growth as well.
Okay.
Future employees. So when we look at how much the space needs are going to be, includes not just the current staffing, but how much staffing we would expect to add over the next 30 years.
because once you do this, you're going to have to, I'm worried that we're going to keep growing. Even though we're only 19 square miles, we still continue to grow.
That's,
My next question, I guess, is you are not touching St. Clair, correct?
no,
Bad juju if you touch St. Clair.
that's actually designated park space, so there's
Okay.
limitations about what could be
Just want to
done.
make sure because
Has
we
to
did,
measure
in the
about that.
past, we've had some people try to, try to get rid of our St. Clair. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Neill and then Chahal.
Okay, thank you. Looked like the statement of work and all that was extremely well thought out. So I had a couple of reactions. So there's references in here to meetings with the core team and, workshops, but maybe I missed it, but who are the members of the core team?
We're talking about an internal core team to figure out what the space needs are going to be, what everything we're going to have. So this is not a outside group. It's a core team, an internal staff core team.
And how long and they would be meeting and then that core team would produce a report in December? Is that
No,
what,
no.
okay.
The key thing, and the key thing we want to come back to you in December is look at really financial feasibility. And we want to come back to it. We have done work on this before. We have a general idea of our needs and space needs. I have general idea, and we have general idea, and the consultant team in Silicon Valley Power here as well of how much we think something like this would cost.
there.
Looking,
They're all over.
They moved.
they moved on me. I know. They can't do that late in the game. We want to come back with some early discussions as to whether we think there's an opportunity to try to build everything at once, or if it has to be phased. And my personal goal is, as we're master planning, it's really just have the decision point made whether we should come up with a master plan that can be phased. Because that's a very different approach than assuming you have $200 million that you can spend at one time.
Okay, so is one of these buildings going to be called the John Rockema Memorial Electric Utility Building? I mean, John was the first one I think I heard talk about it some years ago, and he had some ideas there.
We'll just call it the Rock.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things when I was looking at like the statement of work and was the City Hall, this was on page 6, the City Hall Project Financial Feasibility Report, and there were four alternates to be studied and one of them was all leasing for residential or office. So at one point some years ago, the concept was floated of kind of redeveloping this property and putting a city hall in the downtown area. And I know that there are members of the Reclaiming Our Downtown group that have been advocating for that. So if that fourth alternative is considered, would that mean that we would move the city hall someplace else, since the city does own property in the downtown area? I mean, is that what the thought there was?
No, all the alternatives that are going to be considered here are related to the kind of the city hall staying in place. We want to look at the value of the land to see if you wanted to do residential, office, what the values would be, what the maximum value would be. We understand that the Reclaiming Our Downtown Task Force has expressed interest in moving City Hall downtown. What we would do with this process is feed all the information with regards to, how many parking spaces would be needed, how much space would be needed, what the cost would be. And then as part of their process, that consultant could take a look as to where that building could fit, where it would go, how the parking would be accommodated. And of course, because that space is a little smaller, probably looking at a more urban type design. So we know there's interest there, and our goal would be to give all the information regarding space needs, square footage needs, parking needs, and as part of that process, they can determine if trying to put that building downtown would be a priority for them amongst the other priorities that they have.
Yeah, because if we did go, if the campus was a little denser, and it still would be great to have the open space, because it seems like increasingly members of the community do use the plaza, for recreation or just for community gathering.
Just a note on that, I'll say that the financial discussion we'll have is part of that as well, that if you go to more of an urban type building, if you want to do something like underground parking, you're talking about going probably closer to that $250 million range for a project, but we'll know more as we do the analysis.
Right. I mean, but if we had a little freer space, maybe we could, back when I was on the school board, we were able to build housing for our certificated staff, and we were able to do it because we did it on our own property. So, I mean, that might be one alternative, is to develop some, housing for some we've talked about different ways that we've been looking at that. So it might, that might be
True.
an idea.
On a short commute, right? To
Yeah.
work, right?
And of course,
Yeah.
like I said, our goal is to really just early
Yeah.
enough, just provide you a picture of, if you wanted to do something like that, what the value of the land would be. So that'll really help the decision-making as to really what can we afford as we move forward with the project and what funding sources might be available.
And thank you for that. And you said that the former housing division, and then before that, I think Chamber of Commerce building out on El Camino, somebody is occupying that
That's
now?
correct. All our, looking at all our building inspectors are over there now. I went and visited the site because, as I mentioned, we're getting requests, and I thought there was still a little space available, but no, it's all being used. All the building inspectors have relocated to that facility because we needed additional space here within
Yeah.
City Hall, and because they're out in the field a little more, it made more sense. I mean, obviously, we like to have them in the same part of this as the building, as the rest of the building staff, but it's the best we could do.
Well, I think the housing division used to like being out there because they were kind of out there, kind of doing their own thing. It was kind of cozy. It was a nice little building, but I'm glad it's being utilized.
I think Jonathan loves being down here now.
Yeah, right, and down in the dungeon.
Thank you. Councilmember Chahal and then Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the overview. Question regarding the process, how we did the RFQ and costing for it. So we did the RFQ and we found out two groups were pretty close, like Smith and Anderson. So am I missing that we only went with Smith for the monetary part of it? We did not ask any other group to give the quotation for the monetary part after we qualified the vendors?
Yeah, that's correct. So we went through what's called an RFQ or an SOQ, which are selecting people just based on their qualifications, and then you negotiate a cost. Pretty standard process that you do for this type of design contracts, architectural engineering, especially when you don't have quite a defined scope yet. The scoring is shown on the sheet. I would say that we also ranked them, and the entire panel had Smith Group as the number one choice.
Right.
So we had those number one choice. Then we negotiated a contract with them, and with our experience and looking at what other cities are doing, we wanted to get to a number we're all comfortable with. We know what master plan costs, what CEQA documents cost, what community engagement process costs. So we felt we reached a number that was within the type of contracts that we see. And at that point, we move forward with them. If Smith Group, we could not come to a budget that we thought was reasonable, we could always went to a second one, but in this case, that wasn't necessary. We went with the unanimously selected consultant, the most qualified.
Okay, so that is, I treat as a standard process.
That's correct.
We do the SOQ and then we negotiate. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. And my next question is about you brought the phase one. By December, we will have the financial feasibility studies on that. So are we trying to process in a way, let's say the financial feasibility comes within the scope of whatever we think is we can manage. Due to one reason or the other, would these reports be coming back to us after every phases so that we can move to next phase after that? Let's say financial feasibility, there are two options. It comes within the scope of our budget and we say, oh, it's manageable. Or it can be so divergent, we think, oh, no, it's so astronomical, we cannot even look at it. So do we stop our contract over there, or we come after every phase, we come to the council for approval of going to the next phase?
So two notes on that. I think what we're looking at coming with you in December is not the final financial feasibility report. It's really just to get a perspective on where are we at, right? This project's going to cost X, and we think that if we wanted to do something with the land, we can get this much, and what's our delta. So that's not going to be the final, but the council will be able to determine based on what the delta is there a way to close that delta? Would you like us to look at it? Or realistically, that delta is so significant that we're looking at this as a much longer term project that has to be phased in. So that's the preliminary. As we work through the process, we'll tighten up all our numbers for everything and come back with final numbers. That's just the first step. I think I was trying to get to my slide on community engagement. And I think in that, as part of that, we have 4+ meetings with the council. So we are going to have check-ins with the council throughout the entire process. We don't want to surprise you with anything along the way as we start finalizing key items, like master plans, phasing, buildings, where they would go, what we want to move forward with the EIR on. We are going to check in with you to make sure that that's what you'd like to move forward with, because ultimately that'll be a policy decision. Another key item is if we want to move forward with the utility building, there's different funding opportunities for the utility building you can look at, and we want to share those options with you to see what's the preferred option by the council from a policy perspective. So there'll be multiple check-in points along the way.
Okay, and that was my other question, like how we are trying to balance the funding by utility building and versus the city hall, like that will be part and parcel of the proposal, basically.
That's correct. And with the utility building, it is an enterprise fund. We have different options. And as I mentioned, we already have, I think, around $18 million in the capital budget that's already funded. So we have a starting point on that. And then there's other funding options as to how you could do it. So we want to make sure to present that discussion for you.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this report. I just want to make sure I miss something. You talked about how the 95,600 square feet, it includes 12,000 for Silicon Valley Power and water and sewer. It doesn't include the old police station. Did I miss something? Are there plans for the old police station or?
No, ultimately it has to be demolished.
Demolished?
The question is when.
Okay.
And just to let you know, since I brought it up twice, so at Martin Avenue, which is where the rest of SVP staff, right there at that location, right now we're leasing 33,000 square feet. Just to give you an idea of how much staff is offsite for SVP right now.
So if you're demolishing, that does give some nice options for what could be.
It does give
replaced
options
with.
for, especially if you wanted to phase something in, you have a location that you want to demolish, and it gives more options as well.
Okay. And we'll go with, as best we can, LEED certification at a certain
Yeah, we have
level?
certain requirements. I think
Yeah.
if the council's interested along the way about what additional things they could do, I mean, I'm always happy to cost things out and let you know what we want to do, how much it would cost, and then we can make those choices along the way. I think that'll probably be later on in the process if we decide to move forward with a near-term project, but we can give you some general feedback along the way.
Great, thank you.
Do we know how many acres there are in Civic Center right now?
I believe the area that we have is 13 acres. I don't know if we know what the Triton area, how many acres that is, but
About 10?
But we'll come back and
So we could have as many as 20 or more acres in the whole 23 acres.
we'll go back and double
Okay,
check.
yeah, could you get us that information so
Yeah.
we can see the kind of footprint we're talking about?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you. Okay, I see no other council questions, so if we can, thank you very much, Manuel, for the report. If we go to the public, is there any member of the public that would like to make any comments? Now's the time. Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Skip Pearson. I'm a member of Reclaiming Our Downtown, and we are so appreciative of what you are doing, considering remodeling or rebuilding the Civic Center. The City Hall was originally in downtown, like it is in most towns throughout the world. But back when Lyndon Johnson was president, everything was bulldozed, including City Hall. And this was built. And we, as part of ROD, would like for the council to consider moving City Hall, especially now that you're considering rebuilding it potentially here, to rebuild it downtown. We think it'll cost less because you're talking about a high rise and you're talking about a much smaller piece of land. And because where we're sitting now, at almost 20 approximate acres, is worth probably 12 million or more per acre. I'm a realtor. And I use that figure not out the top of my head, but last year, an acre, there's several acres, but they were going for $12 million an acre on El Camino, right next to the park that we're talking about. The park in between here and El Camino. So if you go down to El Camino to the park, property to the left, contiguous to the building next to the park. Also for 12 million an acre. So conceivably, it could be, this property could be worth even more because the council, if they chose, could make this very attractive to developers to build residential. Thank you very much. Oh, and
I would like to see my
Councilwoman O'Neill brought up something, excuse me, very important. In reading the proposal that you are going to act on today, it doesn't lay out, although our assistant city manager answered the question, it doesn't lay out as to whether or not one of the alternatives that the Smith Group would be considering in their analysis is moving or rebuilding City Hall downtown. And we would like for the council to consider asking the Smith Group to include that as an alternative scenario, as well as rebuilding on the existing site. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure about 12 million an acre here, Skip, but I like that. That sounds really good to me. That's a $250 million we're sitting on here. Wow. Okay. I like those numbers. Thank you. Anyone else? Please come forward. Okay. Council.
Oh,
what's your pleasure?
Mayor, can I make staff
Councilmember Davis.
recommendation, a motion for staff recommendation to authorize city manager to execute the agreement for design professional services with Smith Group to provide civic center conceptual plan and utility building project consultant services for the maximum compensation not to exceed $1,975,708. Sorry.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion from the council? Councilmember Hardy. Oh, okay.
I just had a note here that I wanted to make certain that the downtown revitalization group was part of this process, and we're able to, their concerns and their possibilities are heard.
Yeah, Manuel, if you'd like to address that.
Yeah, so as part of this contract, we're not proposing to study relocating the building to downtown. What we are planning to do, because the downtown's going through its own process, it has its own task force, and they're gonna have to determine what their priorities are, is we would provide all the information regarding the building sizes, the parking needs, the square footage.
What our needs are, right?
Yeah, and the
That's
cost.
what this study's gonna do.
And
What
the
our
cost.
costs and what our
And
needs
as part of
are.
that process, we will provide that to our downtown consultant, and then the task force can deliberate as to see how that fits within their priorities. And at downtown, we have 6 acres. That creates different things you have to worry about, different concerns. There's also the funding options. So we won't look at it as part of this, but we certainly have our consultants work together to make sure the downtown task force has all that information.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So they'll be in the process at some point when we get some of those facts. All right, thank you, Councilmember Hardy. So we have a motion and a second. Please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, consultants. Thank you, public. All right, next we have a public hearing on an action on a resolution to amend resolution number 198749 to establish the park and lieu fee schedule for new residential development and to determine the park improvement cost to be used in the fee calculations. This is a public hearing, so we're going to open the public hearing. Director of Parks and Recreation, Jim Teixeira, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and Santa Clara community. It's a brief presentation regarding action on the amendment to Resolution 198749, which is to establish the Parkland in lieu fee schedule for the new residential development and determine the park improvement costs that would be used in future.
Can you speak in the microphone if you don't mind? Thank you.
Future fee calculations. My apologies. On August 27th, Council approved the Resolution 1987-49, which included the statutory findings for the Quimby Act and the Mitigation Fee Act, as well as the Nexus study. It also included the parkland standards, the average density for multifamily and single-family homes, the land value, valuation from December 31st, 2017, and the park improvement construction value from 2018. The August 27th resolution also maintained the existing fees as adopted in fiscal year 17-18 for all development projects currently on file. Council at that time also requested additional phase-in options with a minimum of 3 years. And public notice was completed through 2 weekly printed notices, placement of the report in the city clerk's office 10 days prior to today's hearing, as well as an e-notify to persons who have expressed an interest in this topic. The policy alternatives, staff has prepared and analyzed 3 of them for you tonight. A is to phase in the per capita park improvement cost increase over a 4-year period, which would be 25% or $666 per year. Alternative B would phase in the per capita park improvement cost increase over a 5-year period, or 20%, which is $533 per capita per year. And then separately, in 2 years, alternative C requests revisiting the use of a California construction cost index increase or decrease to adjust the park improvement cost basis of $3,471 per capita for future fees. So in looking at policy alternative A, which is a 4-year implementation, some of the pros: it moderates the impact of the increase on housing development. It allows developers 4 years to adjust to the increase in the park improvement value. It also is a potential incentive for developers to bring forward their projects, to expedite them. And then it also advances the city towards the goal of 100% cost recovery on current improvement cost. The cons, however, if implemented, the city would recover less than 100% of the park construction, park improvement cost over the 4-year implementation phase-in period, which basically translates into fewer park amenities could be afforded and incorporated into future parks for future residents. We calculate that to be about 91% of the amenities that you currently find in current parks, which in terms of value for a, let's say, scenario of 100 units is between $978,000 and $1.2 million per project. The additional cumulative effect of this would be typical park construction cost escalation over the phase-in time period would be about 9.2% at the current average over the last 10 years of 2.3%. Alternative B is a 5-year implementation phase-in, and the pros there, similar to the policy alternative A, it moderates the impact of the increase on housing developments. It advances the city towards a 100% cost recovery of the current improvement cost. The cons to this policy would be that, again, the city would recover less than 100% of the park construction, park improvement cost over the implementation phase-in, fewer park amenities afforded and incorporated into future parks. And we calculate that to be about 88% of the amenities that you currently find in current parks for future residents. And the value per 100 unit project is somewhere between $1.3 million and $1.6 million less. The additional cumulative effect of typical park construction cost escalation over the phase-in period would be about 11.5%. So the staff report more fully discusses policy alternative C, But that would address the significant con to the phase-in of the 2018 park improvement value over time, which is that it proposes the city revisit the issue of construction cost escalation and its impact on that park improvement value of $3,471 per capita, which is the $1.335 million per acre of improvements. And we would revisit that in 2 years. One of the reasons there is an increase in the fees themselves, as we had discussed at the August meeting, was that construction costs do escalate. Sometimes they go down, but for the most part, they have been going up over time between 2.3 and 2.7% per year over the last 10 to 11 years. That's shown in the first table that you see in front of you. Again, this amount can go up or down, and while the land valuation component of the in lieu fees is reviewed annually, the park improvement value is not, and it was a low $319,000 per acre back in 2014, or $807 per capita. And then the second table shows the effect of the cost escalation looking to the future if you were to use that same 2.3% cost escalation over a phase-in period. And it shows you what the 2018 value plus the implementation effect is. So in summary, the alternatives, we had one that we proposed August 27th, which was an increase of $61 in the first year and then $868 in the following years. The second alternative is to go with a 4-year proportional increase of 25% per year of the $2,664 of the increase, which is $666 per capita, or do that over a 5-year period. And then the final one is in 2 years, revisit the issue of cost escalation. This table provides a summary head-to-head comparison of the different policy alternatives in terms of the fee amount that would be used in the calculations. And in wrapping up, the fee implementation schedule, which is also the focus of tonight, Mitigation Fee Act would be able to be implemented 60 days after the approval of a resolution. So that would bring us to 12/28/2019. And in the case of Quimby projects, that would be as immediately, therefore, as of tomorrow. The next land valuation, just to highlight that, we haven't updated that since 2017, so we will be starting that process at the conclusion of this year. And in March, bringing forward what those valuations are for the 3 zip code areas for land valuation. And then computing a fee resolution for the end of the fiscal year. Again, that would not be implemented until after July 1st, and it would use whatever park improvement value that you approved tonight in terms of a phase-in. Finally, the staff recommendation is alternatives A and C, which is the 4-year phase-in, and then in 2 years to revisit the cost escalation issue. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Director Teixeira. We're going to start with some council questions. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. And thank you for the report, Director Teixeira. As you know, a topic near and dear to my heart. So I'm glad to see that I read the letter while I was sitting outside from our comrades at BIA, and they talk about the 50% credit, which, in the interest of trying to encourage, encourage developers, I believe I was the one who proposed that back in 2014. So I'm glad that that's working well. But one of the things that's kind of interesting, it seems like since we've done this, it's like every year we spend a lot of time and things get delayed, either, in discussion, or I'll put it kindly, discussion about what the valuation should be. And then when we go to reset, all these phased in periods. So, it almost seems like it's kind of interesting that we're rather, we're doing these 4 or 5 year phase-ins. I mean, should we be saying, okay, maybe a couple of us got it wrong when we proposed the 100% cost recovery, and should we be saying that, it's, the debates that we get into and the pushback and all of that, that's not just the worth, that's not the right approach, and maybe we should, or should, have we looked at saying, okay, we're not really getting 100% because we're phasing in the fees over so many years that we're not getting anywhere near 100%. So should we just say that we should lower the percentage and be kind of upfront about it and say, and perhaps save ourselves all these iterations of going through and debating what the fee should be? Or, maybe the
So
smile on your face tells me.
I think there's a question in there, I guess, is how I would put it. And if the question is relative to tonight's presentation and resolution, on August 27th, Council did set what the strategy policy would be, which is 100% cost recovery. What we're doing tonight, you can go up to 100%. You can't go above that. And so the phase-in strategy gives you a point at which you know that you're progressing towards that.
Right, but you're not, let's be honest, we're not getting 100% cost. We're not getting, because we've got all these tables, we're just I'm not faulting you, I'm just saying, let's say what it is. We're not getting, 100% fees, because particularly when it went from originally 3 years to 4 years, then in 5 years if you calculate, it's somewhere, we'd have to sit down, and perhaps Councilmember Hardy would help me do the math. It's somewhat less. I'm just saying maybe it's for future consideration. If we're going to go through this kind of exercise every couple of years, should we just say, okay, we're not going to get 100%. We'll admit that. Is there something else? Because, but once again, my concern is, even when we build these projects, what is it, that's what I've said on a lot of these projects. And I'm a huge believer in building housing and everything, but I do believe that we've got to have appropriate levels of park, and I know you believe this is your life, parks and rec facilities for people to have that quality of life. Looking at the trade-offs there. So maybe that's for a future council policy discussion in terms of, like I said, I don't think we're being we're not really admitting the reality that we don't have 100% cost recovery.
So if I could also address it, in a different way of looking at cost recovery, we're focused a lot on the fees. If we take a step back and we say, we're looking at setting the fees at 100% of, if we require 3 acres per 1,000 new residents under Quimby, 2.6 under acres per 1,000 new residents under MFA. When developers come in and they actually dedicate that parkland at that level, no fees are due.
Right.
So,
and we've had a couple of instances of that.
Right. So if you were to somehow set the fee lower, we would have to have a different discussion about how that actually affects your parkland standard. You've already voted on the parkland standard, which is 3 and 2.6. So I don't have that information to say how it may or may not play out. So hasn't been part of our analysis for tonight to propose not going with 100% cost recovery and then setting fees, phasing those in over time.
Okay, so, and perhaps it's a separate discussion. So like when we get into the costs of, when you look at, it's astronomical what you've calculated the cost of developing an acre of parkland, perhaps then I guess we'll have to say that's what we'll have to talk about, some of the other revenue measures that we've talked about to try to, kind of fill those gaps if we're going to really be able to, if we get the land, to develop it at the level that we want, the standard that we want. Because when you read the report and you talk about if you do this, you're losing a restroom, you're losing a play structure, you're losing a park building, so if we want to have those things, then we have to have another discussion about how do we find a way to make sure, fund those things. Not really, I guess that's a statement, not a question to you, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you, Mayor. So some comments, like I did like the idea of following the California Construction Cost Index. That is in benefit of city as well as the developer. It can go up, go down, but it reduces our risk of putting in money if the cost goes up. At least to an extent, we are covering as per the index. That's fine. And my question is, on page 5 of the report, we have few fee scenarios. Can you explain those a little bit? Two fee scenarios we have for alternative A and B.
Yes. What would you like to know
Can you
about
explain about those as a layman?
So the fee scenario is a hypothetical situation where you just say, what would the effect be of applying these fees to, let's say, a 100-unit complex? And what is the difference between what you would collect from that 100-unit complex if fees were not phased in, if they were 100% cost recovery, $3,471 per capita per person in that development, versus at 25%. So you're basically giving up 75% of the fee in that first year in the 4-year scenario.
So basically, they depend on the current value of the money versus the future value of the money, if I understand it right. Because if you do 100% right away, you get all the money right away and you can manage whatever your development you want to do. Versus when you do it in phase, your value of the money reduces as per the inflation, and you're basically having an impact on your budget, sort of.
Correct.
And that's for both the option A and B.
Correct. It's a way of giving an illustration of what is the value of that money. What does it look like?
Right. So does when we bring in alternate C, which covers the cost of construction as per the index, does that help to recover more of our fees in the scenarios the cost goes up or down?
It addresses the future impact of cost escalation or reduction is what it does.
So it covers our risk, basically, that index, right?
The cost escalator is recommended for it goes in after year two. So we did, for the current value, we did try to account for it. And then we are recommending that the cost escalator be introduced after the second year to address the point that you just spoke to.
So did we think of introducing after first year, basically, instead of after 2 years?
The year can move, but what we wanted to first do is consider that the council did ask for a phased-in approach, recognizing that developers need the time in order to program into their spreadsheets the cost, and so we felt that 2 years was reasonable, so that any assumptions with respect to housing production and things of that sort could be addressed, but wanting to recoup the future value of those funds within a reasonable time frame.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good idea, and I really like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of comments because I can understand Councilmember O'Neill's frustration about we want 100% park fees. We do. We voted on 100% park fees. Using the phased-in really ends up discounting those over a certain number of years. It was really a policy decision for us because, first of all, the values of the land went up so dramatically, so our park fees went up dramatically as well. As well as the cumulative efforts, the accumulation of all the different fees that the city charges is really discouraging some of our higher density residential developers to build. So this was a slight relief in a short period of time, really, in a point in time. I didn't mean a short period. In a point in time, to encourage the residential development, to give a phased-in approach on the fees, which will cost the city and park fees a little bit, as was pointed out in the report. So it's not truly 100%. It will be 100%, but it's phased. So it's discounted because it is phased. But it again encourages the residential development, which in turn we will still get parkland. We will still get fees. It'll just be over a 2, 3, or 4 year period. So it really was a policy decision to encourage more residential development, because without it, the fees may have been, so high because the escalation of the land values went up so much that that maybe the developers wouldn't build, and then therefore we're not going to get any park fees or park land. So it was this is a one-time decision, but I am not in favor of going back and changing our structure for park fees, because we've actually gotten some parkland dedicated. We are going to be looking at opening several new parks soon because of our park fee and our parkland dedication. So I'm not in favor of changing it, just because this was a policy decision to attract more residential at a time when we needed more residential. So I just wanted to give my opinion on that. Is there any other council comments on this? If not, we're going to go to the public. The first we have is Dennis Martin. If you'd like to come forward, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Gilmore and members of the council. Dennis Martin speaking on behalf of BIA Bay Area. And first of all, I want to thank you for your considerable deliberations on this issue. This actually was the first issue that we handled when we started the BIA almost 6 years ago now. And we know how important it is to the city. We want to thank staff. Mr. Clara and Mr. Pineda have been fantastic in working on this issue over the years, and we really appreciate their efforts. And we know that parks are important to the City Council, but we also understand that you understand that housing is crucial to this city, and maybe the number one issue right now, because you do have a jobs, housing imbalance and a desperate need for housing. So you have to balance these issues, no question about it. So we are really recommending a phase-in. Now our letter advocates alternative B, but we would be certainly okay with 4-year. We also think that because you do value housing and the viability of it, that you will consider increasing the exemption for on-site affordable units beyond what you're already doing, up to 100% exemption. And then take 2 actions to help the Nexus study and the land appraisal, update land appraisal instructions for the appraiser to include current and increased fees and requirements. Also establishing another level of occupancy to consider smaller units, because many smaller units are going to be built on the north side of Santa Clara. We also know that you're looking at some major topics for the next year, including a development feasibility study. We think that's very important for you to understand how residential development is going to proceed. We'd like to encourage you to convert from per unit to per square footage assessment of fees, and then to collect fees later in the development process at certificate of occupancy and not building permit. It allows the developer to forestall higher finance fees when he has to borrow fees for his project. So really appreciate your work on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we do have your letter. Thank you. Anyone else? Please come forward if you'd like to speak on this issue. Okay, seeing none, this is a public hearing, so do we have a motion to close the public hearing? Motion second to close the public hearing. Please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. Do I have a motion? Anyone? Councilmember Hardy.
I like, because I am a numbers person, I liked when I went through, I thought, oh, wait a minute, I really like the 4-year, but we need to look at it. And when I got to the end, I found that that was the exact same recommendation staff had, which made me very happy because I liked the idea of being able to revisit situations, but I also felt like a 3-year was too quick. 5-year was what someone who is paying it would want. I understand that. So I felt like alternative A was a really good option. So I'd like to make the motion to adopt the alternatives A and C as recommended by staff.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second for alternative A and C. Alternative A is the phase in over 4-year period, and C is in 2-year revisit the use of the construction cost to adjust the park improvement cost basis per capita. Okay, so that is staff recommendation. And there's a second. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Pardon me, yes.
Thank you.
I thought maybe she'd fall asleep.
So that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you, staff, for that report. Okay, next on the agenda, we have item number 6, action on the resolution approving the award of agreement to Levy Premium Food Service Limited Partnership for food and beverage operations, Santa Clara Convention Center, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute the agreement, to take ministerial actions to implement the terms of the agreement, and to execute 2 5-year options to potentially extend the term of the agreement through June 30th, 2035.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Ruth Shikata, Assistant City Manager. So we have a brief overview tonight about the procurement process and the selection and the contract terms for you tonight. So this is our agenda. We're going to provide you with a brief background, and then we have other people on staff that will participate in the presentation. We have Mark Giovanetti, who's our Purchasing Division Manager, Grace Doherty, who's our Contracts Manager, and Nancy Thum, who's an Assistant to the City Manager. So as a brief background, as the council knows, in March of this year, Spectra took over the operation of the convention center. And when that happened, we started to take a fresh look at all the contracts that were in service at the convention center, and one of those was the food and beverage. The food and beverage contract hadn't been updated in quite some time, and the contract was with the Chamber of Commerce. So the city decided to move forward and look at an RFP process for a longer-term contract for food and beverage. So in May of this year, we released a request for proposals for the food and beverage operations. And soon thereafter, Aramark, who had the contract with the chamber, delivered us a notice that they would be ceasing the food and beverage operation in the center effective July 26th. So that really didn't give us a lot of time. We confirmed with them that they would be exiting the building, and that in July of this year, the council authorized an interim agreement with a Spectra company with Ovation Food Services to provide food and beverage from the time of July of this year through December of 31st at the end of the year. This allowed us time to complete the procurement process and to move forward with the transition and then start really with a brand new contract operating as of the first of the year. So now we're going to go into the overall procurement process, and then I'm going to turn this over to Mark Giovanetti.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, Mark Giovanetti, Purchasing Manager. See here, get situated, if you'll just bear with me. There we go. The RFP was a 3-month process commencing in May and concluding in August with the issuance of the Notice of Intent and Award. Since August, staff has been negotiating and preparing the final agreement with Levy. The process was fairly typical and consisted of noticing the RFP, a question and answer period that included a pre-proposal conference at the convention center, which included a tour of the facility itself, evaluating and shortlisting the written proposals, oral presentations that included a food tasting, and a best and final offer. The evaluation team was well represented with expertise from inside and outside the city. In this case, we were fortunate to have outside industry knowledge and representation from Santa Clara University and Great America, in addition to the 3 internal evaluators that you see listed. Three proposals were received from Levy, Ovations/Spectra, and Volume Services/Centerplate. And my understanding that given the market relative to the city's requirements, this was a good number of proposals to receive from recognized industry, with recognized industry representation. So the written proposals were scored against the criteria and weights that you see listed. All 3 proposers were invited to the next phase of the process. But at this point, when Centerplate was invited to phase 2, they notified the city that they were electing to withdraw from the process. And what they shared with staff is that they had made an internal decision, a business decision, not to invest further in the process. So phase 2 did involve transportation out here, staying, probably overnight, and a day's commitment, and the food and all the process that went along with it. So phase 2 was the fun part of the process because you got to meet their team, understand their approach to servicing the city's account, and best of all, you got to taste their food. No, I didn't, and I wasn't able to attend. I'm still upset about that. So I think what's notable here with the scoring criteria is that in phase 2, that's when the oral presentation and the tasting was introduced. That carried 30% of the weight. So you can see that the other weights for the other evaluation criteria were adjusted to maintain that 100-point scale. So a best and final offer, that's optional at our discretion, at the city's discretion. The evaluation committee decided that they wanted to have a best and final for the purpose of hopefully getting a better financial proposal, cost proposal, and then memorializing maybe some of the oral representations that were made during the oral presentations. You'll hear things you want to go ahead and nail it down and get it in writing through the best and final offer process. So with me is from Finance Purchasing is Grace Doherty, and she is going to present a summary of the financial proposal. Sorry, I didn't advance that slide.
Okay, thank you. Grace.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Grace Doherty, a contracts manager in the Purchasing Division of Finance Department. On August 7th, the city received the best and final offers from both Levy and Ovations. In the next couple slides, I will be presenting a high-level overview of the financial proposals they submitted. Both Levy and Ovations increased their investments to enhance the food and beverage services at the convention center. Levy did not change the original investment of $5 million, but committed an additional $750,000 to go towards programs that drive community engagement. Spectra, or Ovations in this case, on the other hand, increased their capital investment from $5 million to $7 million over the term of the agreement, and committed to contribute $10,000 annually to nonprofit organizations. Their investments was going to be amortized over 15 years, the same for Levy as well. Levy and Ovations did not change their original management fees, but Ovations did change their incentive fee structure to focus on driving profits over $3 million. So as you can see there, it's 6% on net operating profits up to $3 million, and then a considerable increase to 13.5% on profits over $3 million. Both Levy and Ovations offered rebates in the event that they did not meet their key commitments under the agreement. For Levy, they committed up to $200,000 of their management fee, and for Ovations, they committed up to 50% of their incentive fee. While both Levy and Ovations projected similar gross revenue of about $67 million over 5 years, Ovations projected a higher cost to run the food and beverage operations at the convention center, which resulted in lower projections for the net revenue to the city. So Ovations projected operational costs was going to be $46 million compared with Levy's $39 million. And that's the difference in the total net return to the city. And I'll hand it back to Mark.
Just to wrap up the RFP process, you see the final evaluation scores, two very strong proposals from two very strong companies with around 5% separation in the final scores. Then I had mentioned the notice of intended award. It is our practice now with these RFPs, with our bids, to issue notices of intended award to all of the participants in the process via the bid sync system. So it's pushed out to them. They understand what our recommendation is. That we disclose our scores, how we arrived at the recommendation. It's a summary of a presentation like this. And then that initiates a 10-day protest process. And in this case, no protests were received. So that leads to the recommendation for Levy Premium Food Services Board of Contract.
So as you can see there, the recommendation is to award to Levy Premium Food Service Limited Partnership. Staff recommends award of contract to Levy based on receiving the highest overall score. And the evaluation team unanimously agreed that Levy's unique approach, product quality, and philosophy were the best value for the city and would position this convention center very competitively in the market. To highlight some of the key characteristics that the evaluation team noted are the following bullets. Levy presented a very high-quality, creative food offering unique to Santa Clara. They presented a food story to create a truly unique offering to elevate the experience of convention center guests. As I had mentioned earlier, Levy committed to fund a capital investment of $5 million to pay for startup costs and ongoing innovation and transformation projects. And in addition, they committed to invest additional $750,000 to drive community enrichment and local partnerships. And lastly, they committed to purchase a minimum of 25% locally, specifically within the Northern California region. Levy also presented a well-designed financial model to control costs by leveraging its national purchasing power and using their own in-house bakery to reduce costs. So during the food tasting, they were able to showcase how having an in-house bakery reduces costs as well as improves the quality and freshness of the various bakery items. Levy also uses a proprietary data analytics software to measure customer satisfaction and determine what marketing and sales opportunities to introduce to the convention center guests. Levy also has a local workforce of 10,000 to draw from to scale up or down. And lastly, Levy presented a pro forma budget that they have committed to that's captured in the agreement. They are confident in their financial projections and place $200,000 of their management fee at risk in the event that they can't meet the key projections in their proposal. And the last slide here is staff did conduct a reference check with Kentucky International Convention Center, the Greater Columbus Convention Center, and Puerto Rico Convention Center, and all references came back very positive for Levy's performance in food delivery as well as in meeting financial commitments.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Nancy Thum, Assistant to the City Manager. I'm going to go through the recommended contract terms with Levy's. And a lot of it you've actually just heard both Mark and Grace talk about, but we'll still review some and then there'll be additional information for you as well. So when we released the RFP, we were initially looking at a 5-year term. With the timing of the transition and also to align with the city's fiscal year, we're proposing an initial 5.5-year term. It also includes 2 5-year options to extend the agreement. And as you know, we have the interim food and beverage operations happening right now with Ovations, which expires in December. So the agreement also incorporates a 60-day transition period with Levy assuming full operations as of January 1st. In addition, each party's prospective rights are documented relative to the termination of the agreement. As mentioned, Levy will assume full food and beverage operations January 1st. They have a very specialized convention center team that will manage all aspects of food and beverage operations, including the food service areas, concessions, refreshment stands, and also maintaining and repairing as needed. It is documented that they will adhere to the standards and requirements as needed regarding food preparation, safety and sanitation, just to name a few. And really overall, when we looked at developing what they would do as the food and beverage operator, it was really to create that, we stole the word from Levy, but that food story and that food experience that will help keep the convention center competitive with other venues in the area in terms of cost, quality, and overall customer experience. Levy will also adhere to the city's worker retention policy and will establish avenues to maintain regular communications with the city and also the operator, Spectra. Levy has made commitments to local purchasing and recycling and sustainability efforts. They have committed to purchase, sell, and feature locally produced products, minimum of 25%, and the city will work with them to establish on the reporting mechanism to demonstrate their overall purchasing volume. They also propose various recycling and sustainability practices, and we've listed a couple there for you. But their 5-year roadmap that they plan to implement will be very specific to that of the convention center. In terms of community impact and accessibility, Levy looks to be a resource to the residents pursuing a career in hospitality, and they will implement a training kitchen to provide career training, internships, and job placement, and they will work with the city to identify partnering opportunities in the community, not only as an organization to give back, but also individual opportunities for their employees to volunteer and give back to the community that way. In regards to public space activation, Levy will develop concepts and creative ways to deliver retail concessions that will make the open spaces and somewhat underutilized spaces in the convention center more inviting and welcoming. Really, the goal is to bring in community members and to really engage the clients that are there for events to come early or stay there longer. As noted, it does include the management fees and incentive fees, and Grace went through that. What we listed here for you are some of the key performance measures that are tied to the incentive fees. As you see, some of them we also talked about already: sustainability, local purchasing requirement, and workplace development. Levy is making several investments. As stated, they will be making an upfront capital investment of $5 million to fund improvements to the food services facilities, as well as their transition to the building. As of their $5 million capital, a little more of half the funds will be utilized as they prepare to assume operations January 1st. And the list of pre-opening expenses are included as Exhibit B in the agreement. The city and Levy will work together to implement the initial plan, and we will continue efforts and discussion to determine what the remaining unrestricted funds will be used for. It is worth noting that the investment is amortized over 15 years, and in the event of early termination, the city will be obligated to reimburse Levy for any unamortized portion. Levy is also investing $750,000 to the community enrichment programs. And again, the city and Levy will work together to determine how the funds should be invested. Finally, there are several reporting requirements, both operational and financial, outlined in the agreement, so that the city, also working with Spectra, will have clear visibility into the operations of the food and beverage services at the convention center. That concludes the overview, and at this point, I will turn it back to Assistant City Manager Rushikata.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy.
Almost done. So I just have one or two more slides. So in anticipation and in hopes that the council would agree and approve the contract tonight, we've started to work with Levy on an informal basis on transition. There's 60 days left before they take over full operation of the food and beverage at the convention center. And during the RFP process, there were employees that were concerned about what their future might be given a potential change. So let me just go over a little bit about what's happening with the transition and where we're headed. Before I go any further, I just want to make a comment that there is a representative from Levy here tonight, Joel Alexander. And the Levy is based out of Chicago, and I'm just going to leave a little bit of an introduction of Levy to Joel. As far as the transition is concerned, Spectra, which is Spectra as the convention center operator, Ovations and Levy are preparing a transition under the city's worker retention policy. So they've already had discussions with this food service worker union, and they're talking about their collective bargaining agreement, and as reported, things are all on track and going well. Ovations and Levy's have also engaged in a mutual hiring process, meaning that currently we are not fully staffed. Ovations is not currently fully staffed in the convention center, but that rather than wait until Levy takes over on January 1st, they're working together to make sure that any hires that come on board, that we can kind of hit the ground running, or they can hit the ground running as it may be as of January 1st. So they're working together to try and get employees to come in on an earlier earlier rather than later basis. There's already been a walkthrough of the convention center to take a look at the equipment that is already there so they know what kind of investments they need to make. Their approach to food service is very different than the Aramark approach, and so that they've already started to take a look at the kind of inventory we have and knowing what kind of inventory that they'll need to procure it in order to start service in January. We had a large transition meeting late last week where convention center employees, convention center service folks like PSAV and Smart City were there just to understand how all the parties and partners may interact with one another. And then because the agreement, the food and beverage agreement, is going to be directly between the city and Levy, there is also in the agreement coordination requirements of Spectra as the convention center manager, because we want the parties to work together closely and want to make sure that, that the things that Levy does positively impacts the overall convention center, and that the convention center itself is communicating well with Levy as food and beverage operator. So that Spectra has agreed to sign an addendum assuming the responsibilities of or acknowledging their responsibilities as the convention center operator in respect to the Levy agreement. So everything has been prepared, and in fact that as we go to the recommended action, at the time that we prepared the staff report, we asked for authority to negotiate and execute the agreement, thinking that there might be some loose ends still that needed to be tied up. But as it so happens, we do have a final agreement. It's been executed by Levy, and then pending your consideration and approval tonight, that will be ready for execution later this week. The other actions that we've asked for the council to authorize is to let the city manager take any ministerial actions consistent with the agreement. There might be some things that we didn't think about in the agreement that needs to be done from a procedural basis or a coordination basis, and then would like the city council to authorize the manager to be able to take those steps, and if necessary, make minor modifications to the agreement. And then lastly, the resolution also requests your authorization for the manager to be able to execute the option agreements, in the agreement to extend it, presuming that everything is going well. So with that, if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce Joelle Alexander, who's the Vice President at Levy Convention Centers.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Aren't you glad you're on the end of the agenda?
I know, standing between
so
you
happy.
and home. And good evening, Mayor and Council. Joyelle Alexander, Vice President of Business Development for Levy Convention Centers, and I'm truly delighted to be here. I know I don't have, here's the clicker. It's just a snapshot of Levy Convention Center's footprint. So we're a company out of Chicago, our headquarters. We started 40 plus years ago as a delicatessen. Two brothers with a struggling business brought in mom to help revive things. And 40 years later, here we stand. We went from the delicatessen into restaurants and into sports and entertainment. But back in 2016, we lifted up our dedicated convention center division, because Levy quickly realized that running a ballpark and arena is nothing like running a convention center. And back in 2016, that's when we stood this up. And here you can see a footprint. We run convention centers from Puerto Rico to Hawaii, from New York to Texas. And what it means to Santa Clara is that we can bring the dedicated expertise and best practices to the convention center, but at the same time, making sure that we create a unique food story that we can help and define what Santa Clara Convention Center is to the market, and make sure that it's competitive as you, I guess we'd say, rebirth the Santa Clara Convention Center with all the changes that are taking place. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for applying and winning. Okay, council, do we have
Questions? Yes.
questions? I'm sorry, I'm trying to get back to the main page here. I was deep in the contract. Sorry.
Reading the contract?
Yeah, I was reading the contract. All right, Councilmember O'Neill and then Chahal.
Well, thank you very much. So some of my questions have been answered because I am a little embarrassed to, particularly when I see this slide. I had not heard of Levy until the stadium management company suggested Levy. They won the contract for Levi's Stadium, not to Levy and Levi's, not that we get that confused. So a couple of my questions, I guess, I've already kind of heard that Levy's has a lot of experience other than working at stadiums. And then I was thinking, is there any way to leverage the fact that right across the street is Levi's Stadium? But it sounds like you're saying that they're very, very, very different businesses, even though we have all those club spaces where there's a lot of special events and catering. So there won't be leveraging, or I was even thinking of the workforce for depending on where events are booked.
Yes, ma'am. So there is an opportunity. When we talk about the dedicated convention center division, it's really from a leadership perspective, best practices, and how we manage the convention center business. And you can see the benefits of that when you looked at like some of the operational costs, because you learn efficiencies and best practices and things like, people think it's better to buy bread across the street, but no, it's really better to bake your bread, and it increases your quality as well as decreases your cost. But when it comes to the sports and entertainment division across the street at Levi Stadium, absolutely, there's an opportunity for us to leverage from staff perspective and being able to flex up and flex down. Back in 2006, Levy was also purchased by Compass, which is the largest food and beverage provider in the world. And with that, we also have sister companies like Bon Appetit at Google and some of that footprint across the Northern California area. So at any point, if we had Amazon at the convention center and we needed to flex up to be able to accommodate the 10,000 guests that are now there, we can tap on all of our sisters and brothers in the area and bring in quality staff and not have to necessarily go through a staffing agency or a temp agency.
Yeah, I know so Bon Appetit is part of the same organization?
It's under the Compass umbrella.
Okay, I know they're the food provider for Santa Clara University, I think.
Correct.
So there was a comment made, I think by Ruth, whatever, that this is very different than Aramark. I mean, so how would you say, I've always thought that the food at our convention center was, quite good compared to, particularly compared to some of the other local convention centers. So what would you say is different about Levy's approach to food?
Well, I would definitely have to say it starts with our roots in that we started as a delicatessen and we're in the restaurant business. And so unlike some convention center providers, it's all about efficiency and Schaefer's, which we call food coffins in our world, because we don't use any of that. It's our goal to make sure that the food experience at the convention center and all of our venues is at par with a restaurant experience. And so we want our guests not to feel like, oh, we just had a convention center chicken breast, but they really had food and beverage experience. And that's part of the food story. It's not about just throwing, a rubber chicken on a plate for the banquet. It's really about having the expertise, and your staff had the opportunity to meet our VP of Culinary. The passion behind the food experience is, obviously I'm biased, but it does not compare to our competitors. And with that, and again, it goes back to our convention center division, where we've been able to just innovate and create things that are really sustainable in the market and enhance the guest experience.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So I'll just make another, this is towards Mark and Ruth and all the folks on the team. I did read through the contract, and I thought, particularly compared to some of the documents that, when we unearthed the 30-year-old agreements, I thought it was very comprehensive, and particularly in terms of protecting the financial interests of the city and, the whole including of the KPIs. And I thought it was very well done, and how we would measure performance and how compensation would be based on it. So thank you for a job well done with the agreement.
Thank you. Councilmember Chahal and then Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with that. Great job, Mark and team, whole of the staff and everybody. It was one of the very detailed, oriented, and full of financial numbers and with the projection. It was really a great report to go through, and done a great job. I do have a question on one of the screens, which is PowerPoint number 14, basically, which has the projected operational costs and the projected net revenue figures. Yeah, that's the one. So I see a drastic difference between the operational cost. My first question is between the two vendors. My first question is, does city play any role in controlling the operational costs, how the operational costs are managed by the vendor? Any checks and balances that we are able to control operational cost?
So we don't operate, we're not operating, so we're not telling Levy how to run their business. However, having said that, because we have sight lines into the financials and we can get monthly reporting, we'll be able to see trends. And then so if there are issues, we can bring them up and we can talk about them. But we, in our contract, we are not directive on how they should run their business.
Okay, so that's one. So why, if anybody of you analyze that, like why is that difference between Ovation and Levy? They're in the same business basically, and we see a drastic difference between the operational cost one versus the other.
I think one of the ones that there are a number of different reasons, but one of the big reasons that stuck out in my mind is their approach on some of the food that they provide, and as we talked a little bit earlier about the baking, they do a lot of on-site baking, and so when we were talking again, even just this past week, the head culinary person talked about how amazingly inexpensive it is to bake a loaf of bread versus how much it costs to actually buy one. And then so you get an immense amount of quality, you get freshness, and then it's also less than going to the store or going to a vendor and buying a day or two old bread.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
So bread is just not the only thing, but I mean, bread and pastries and things like that they bake on site.
Yes, and I know they mentioned that designed a well-designed financial model to control the operational cost. They do mention that, and they're consolidating all the purchases. Although they're mentioning we'll buy 25% local produce instead of their own purchase power. So those are some other things, and I think that's making the difference between the net revenue to projected net revenue to the city to the extent 40% more than the other partner.
I don't know if I'm missing anything else really big, or you want to?
I would just tag on, you've done a great job in talking about our bread program, but in addition to the operational efficiencies, so when we talk about the dedicated convention center, really the sharing of best practices and being able to, sharpen your pencil, but not erode your quality. And so even speaking to the staffing piece, it's a big piece when you're talking about having to, scale up for a large event. If you're going to a temp agency, it's going to cost you a whole lot more money as opposed to being able to use somebody that's already a part of the Levy Compass family, tap them on the shoulder, get extra hours. And again, now you're just not only benefiting the company, but you're also benefiting these employees getting additional hours across the whole Northern California region.
Okay. Thank you, and I'm so happy to see the projections, like city will be making almost $6 million per year from this thing. That's a good projection. Let's keep it up, and hopefully we can increase it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Davis, and then Watanabe.
Mayor, I just needed a clarification. The $750,000 for the community enrichment, is that yearly? Or is that a one-shot deal? Because you know how I love my community.
We can make it annually. Should we amend the contract?
I don't know.
That's the
It
750.
depends on what their answer is.
That is a one-time.
It's a one-time, over 15 years, one time?
Amortized over 15 years.
Okay. And then on, you said 25% you were going to take from local sourcing for products. Is there, how are you more, because we're California, we kind of have everything here. And so where are you taking the other food products, or how do you do that?
5% is just the commitment from a local perspective, but it's always our goal to, again, when part of the food story is making sure that you have a food story that's, regionally influenced. And so that's just the goal for the contract purposes, but they'll come from all over the country. And that's another cost efficiency. Being a part of Compass, we have buying power because we are the largest food service provider. So when we do buy outside of the region, we're able to get things at a very good price and being able to reap the benefits from a financial perspective.
Okay. Next, the in-house bakery, big plus. Big plus, nothing like fresh bread, because we'll be at the convention center tomorrow, so we're gonna go for those rubber chicken dinners. So Lisa wanted to know when you were starting, and I said January. So we will have a rubber chicken dinner tomorrow. Okay, next, you did answer the question about the workforce, because you could pull from your other, companies. And the other question was, you did say you were doing this. Oh, termination of contract, if you are, I guess that would be you guys. You didn't put in here, is it like a 6 months notice, year notice, or whatever, if things kind of go sideways with us? It just says written notice, it doesn't say.
So in the agreement, we have a full section on how both parties can terminate the contract. So it
Both
could be,
parties?
yes, so it could be terminated for default, or it could be terminated at the time the option or the initial 5-year term ends.
Okay, I just wanted to know about the out clause in case there was an issue. Okay, and then the other thing was, you wanted to work with local people, you train, I guess when you beef up your people. Were we looking at Mission College? We have a hospitality group of people over there that are culinary trained.
Yes, so we will be working with the city as well as Spectra as our partner in the building to identify those mission colleges or other areas where we can tap on shoulders to train people in our teaching kitchen. So not only do we use the tasting kitchen for opportunities to sell and grow business, but we use it as an avenue to be able to help the city by giving people skill sets. And even if we can't hire them in the convention center, but they may be able to get hired at a local hotel, but it's really another way from an outreach perspective to make sure that we're having an impact on the community in which we live.
Yeah, because they have a nice hospitality thing there, so we like to keep people local. We don't want them to move around, so this would be like a good opportunity to keep them, because they're going through the whole training, so that was my other thing. And then you did bring up the public space activation. So in Levi Stadium, you pop up different, let's say, well, let's use Guy Fieri, who put his little chicken place in there. That kind of pop-up activation are you talking about within there? Because there's not a coffee shop in the convention center, which people complain about every day. They get there, they're tired, there's no coffee shop.
So we have proposed both. We have asked for space in the lobby to do a coffee/evening and day and night concept so that you can take advantage of the guests coming in early and having coffee and pastries available. And then also being able to flex and be able to offer adult offerings and things for the evening as well, to be able to make sure that we get guests in earlier and get them to stay longer. But at the same time, yes, transformables, portables, that's what we call our pop-up units. And also given the infrastructure and the complexity of the convention center, there's little nooks and crannies, and we found in our walks prior to the RFP even coming out as we were guests in the convention center that there were opportunities to put food where the guests were, because a lot of times they don't have the time to float around or they don't want to float around. So we have in our proposed investment portable units to be able to add those particular units to areas around the convention center.
Yeah, it's just a great way of enticing people, especially if you have a bakery and the fresh bread smell and you walk in there, yeah, we're all hungry now.
I know it's late, sorry.
And we're very jealous that the staff got to do a food tasting.
We'll make
without the
sure.
council.
We'll make sure that you get a food tasting.
Really?
Yes.
Come on.
We owe you.
We're great gourmets here. Okay.
All right.
Can I make staff recommendation that we approve them and move them on their way?
You can make a motion, I have more lights on.
Oh, I'm
so-
sorry. Okay.
Yeah, you can make it, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to make a motion for staff recommendation to get them moving January 2020.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Councilmember Watanabe and then Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. I was going to say the community enrichment investment, 750,000 equals $50,000 a year. I don't think that's chump change. I think that'll go do some good work in the community, so thank you very much for that. The other thing, talking about the hospitality, reaching out to Mission College, Wilcox High School also has a hospitality program as well. And if there are any internship programs that Levy offers, that would be a great opportunity. They've actually won some awards for their baking, actually. So that could be maybe incorporated. And then there was just one last thing. Regarding the city's worker retention ordinance, you mentioned Ovation and Spectra. Is Aramark part of that worker retention, or are they incorporated?
So Aramark is no longer in the building, so when Aramark exited the building and Ovations came in, then Ovations then took over the workers that were working underneath Aramark.
Okay.
And then, so these are the food service workers are covered under worker retention, but Ovations did also make offers to many of the managers, the sales managers, and at Aramark to come over, and then that process is it's happening as well between Ovations and Levy.
Great. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Hardy?
She stole a little bit of my thunder because I was going to talk about Wilcox since I worked there. I wanted to make the point that the Ovation offer was $10,000 per year, and your offer of $750,000 is 5 times that. So that makes the difference. The Wilcox project is called Champs, and they have won many competitions, and they do have a professional chef there. And partnering with them, they are the closest high school to the convention center and are not far. So that's another possibility. I'm going to put that in there. Thank you.
Thank you. I just had two quick questions or comments. The first is on the $750,000. I didn't really see it in the contract. Is it in there anywhere? I couldn't find it. Probably is. I just couldn't see it. And so the question is, how is the decision-making process for the $750,000? So I want to make sure it's captured somewhere. I didn't find it in the contract, so.
I was waiting to chime in. We'll need to bring that before the council for investment and what the options are.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to make sure that's not lost. And then the second thing is we've had some bad experiences with performance contracts. I'm never in favor of performance contracts. This particular one has, I looked at all the performance measures for, that are required and how they're graded and everything else, and that's all well and good. But do we have the infrastructure set up here at City Hall to make sure that those contracts are, I know we have all the contract managers now, lots of them. Are those contracts going to be managed? I think that's the most important question I have, because it does require a lot of work, as I read through this contract, in terms of monitoring the performance of this contract.
I wasn't certain if you remembered Nancy, but I remember that she has presented at some of the committee meetings. When last year, when we were before the council added a position to help with monitoring the contracts, as well as working with creating the DMO and working with the convention center transition. Nancy has been tasked and has been really putting in a lot of elbow grease in terms of getting us, and you'll see the results of those efforts on November 12th when we come with a full update. But Nancy is our in-house go-to person, as well as Ruth also provides support.
So are you saying the buck stops with Nancy? Nancy, you're in charge of all this to make sure? Okay, that's good. I just want to make sure that's in place because, I want to make sure that we are set up for success on this contract. So, okay, so you're going to bring back the 750 and how that's dealt with and everything else. So, okay, great. We have a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to ask, is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this issue? If so, please come forward. Okay. Seeing none, please register your vote for staff recommendation.
Vice Mayor Mahan, your vote, please.
Maybe a little louder, Nora.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Vice Mayor Mahan, are you with us? Hope we didn't disconnect you.
Yeah, sorry, I
Oh.
was on mute because you said you were getting background noise. But yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
I vote yes.
Okay, so yes. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, congratulations, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you for coming to see us as well and answering our questions. And thank you, staff, for that great report. Thank you. Nancy, get ready. You got a lot of work ahead. Congratulations, thank you.
Pressure's on.
All right, next item we have on the agenda is reports of members and special committees. I have to admit to the council that I left my package on the League of California Cities Conference at home, so I'm going to have to report next week. Gaurav, next week is the report. I will bring it forward next week.
He's got his own report.
So are there other members of the council
Yes.
that, Councilmember Hardy, do you have something?
Yesterday, we had a, starting at 4, ending at 10:30, BPAC meeting.
Did you say 4 to 10:30?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. You did.
Yep, I did. But the good thing is, we have passed the pedestrian master plan that we will get. There was a lot of discussion, but it did pass. And we also had an excellent presentation from a subcommittee on an idea for wayfinding for bicycle paths throughout Santa Clara, and it was excellently done. I will be doing some follow-up on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councilmember Davis.
I had a question for the city manager. There was a public records request done on your trip. Can you call out the trip in public for us? Give us an update what happened? Or, not now, but, you know, can you do that at the next meeting? Okay, because I think when I saw that public records request, I was like, okay, let's get that straightened out. And then the other thing was, the American Legion is having a Veterans Craft Fair, November 9th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the American Legion Post 419 at 958 Homestead, Santa Clara. And they will be selling a lot of things through local crafters, and it will support our veterans. So please attend, and I'll give you another update next week to remind you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the council? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to city manager, executive director report.
I want to report out that our fire department has provided or responded to mutual aid request for the Kincaid Fire. Currently, we have Battalion Chief Potts, who's deployed to the fire site as a safety officer. We also have Santa Clara Engine 97 that has deployed as a strike team for the Kincaid Fire. And Santa Clara Engine 90 is deployed as pre-positioned in Napa in anticipation of any strong wind activity. We also are receiving daily updates from our staff that has been deployed out, and so far, so good for them. They're reporting that they're doing fine. I also want to announce, just in the area of communications, that our library department has won an award on October 24th, excuse me. They were presented with the California Libraries Association PR Excellence Award for promoting and communicating the revitalized bookmobile service through eye-catching design and, of course, the bookmobile karaoke. The bookmobile was recognized for innovative service to the community, expanding beyond the typical bookmill models and showcasing the diversity of our services and our community. The judges described this service as brilliant, love all the ways and ideas to make the revitalized bookmobile something new, clever, fresh, and fun, which we already know here in Santa Clara. And I want to take an opportunity, because 2 policy items were before you this evening that were pretty difficult and complex policies, and I'm proud of the staff work that brought forward and council support of it. One is Jim Teixeira, who's been working with Manuel and Cynthia on the Park and Lieu, very complex policy. I thought that he did a great job, and I thought that he kept the report and information simple. And also want to acknowledge Ruth, Nancy, Grace, and Mark. This was completely unanticipated as part of the transition that Aramark would depart the convention center. They acted very quickly to put an interim program in place, as well as to conduct an RFP process that, as you can see, was very high quality, very well done, and yielded really good results for the city. So just wanted to acknowledge that hard work from them this evening.
We agree with you on both of those reports. They were excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so next we go to the adjournment, and Councilmember Watanabe will be reading the adjournment this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we want to offer our condolences to the Esposo Narciso family from North Santa Clara. They lost the patriarch of their family this past weekend. Hippolito Valdez Esposo, the father of Senior Advisory Commissioner Helen Narciso, who was a World War II veteran and long-term Santa Clara resident. He was born in Santa Fe, San Marcelino, Zambales, in the Philippines, and migrated to Guam in 1970 and then to San Francisco in 1972. Santa Clara reminded him of his home in the Philippines with the open space, farms and orchards, and warm and welcoming people. And in 1976, he settled and laid down his roots in Northside Santa Clara, where he resided for 43 years. He was a loving husband, father, and grandfather, and friend to many, and lived a life full of sacrifice in helping others. As examples of his dedication to others, he was a barrio captain or mayor of his provincial town. He was a World War II veteran, prisoner of war, and survivor of the World War II Bataan Death March. In 2018, Hippolito was presented with the Filipino World War II Congressional Gold Medal. He retired from Intel, and in his retirement, he enjoyed the company of his friends and family. He loved gardening and feeding his large family with his fruits and vegetables, and he was known to send fruits to his grandchildren who were living outside of the area while they were away in college. Hippolito Valdez Esposo passed away peacefully on October 25th, 2019, in Santa Clara at the age of 99 and 2 months. He is survived by his 5 children, one of whom, Helen Narciso, currently sits on the Senior Advisory Commission, his 17 grandchildren, and 25 great-grandchildren. So he leaves a wonderful legacy here in Santa Clara and a wonderful family as well. Thank you.
Kathy, do you know when his services are? This weekend, I think.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you for asking. The funeral, the wake is this Sunday at the Lima Mortuary, and then on Monday, the funeral services will be at Our Lady of Peace, which is also in the north side. I'm not quite certain of the time, most likely, thank you.
9:30 a.m.?
9:30 in the morning, yes.
Our Lady of Peace. Thank you
Yes.
for that, and thank you for reading that and bringing
You're
it to our attention. So would you like to make a motion, Kathy, in
Thank
his
you.
honor to adjourn?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn in memory of the Honorable Hippolito Valdez Esposo.
Second.
A motion and a second to adjourn? Please register your vote.
Vice Mayor Mahan?
Yes.
And that passes unanimously, and meeting's adjourned. Thank you.